Story 1. I discovered my fiancé cheated on me, so I gathered evidence and ruined her life. I thought I had met the perfect woman. We met in the last year of college at a party and hit it off instantly. She was a beautiful blonde with sun-kissed skin, and she could have been a model reminiscent of a Kate Upton type. She was kind, compassionate, sympathetic, a good listener, and had an active life with many friends. She liked my friends, and it was awesome to see how our friend groups merged. Over the 3 years we knew each other, several of our friends began dating each other. It was some of the best times of my life. I was aiming for a postgraduate degree in finance, and she had a degree in contractual law. This is just to say we ended up being successful in our own rights. But I'm no slouch in the looks department either. I'm 5 feet 11 inches and 190 pounds, and I like the gym. I wasn't a super athlete, but let's just say I was built. However, I was and am very shy and didn't have many prior relationships before meeting her. The first evening we met, we were smitten. The first night we talked all night, then it progressed to texting and phone calls daily, then weekly dates, and after a year when I started my new job, she moved in. I loved her family, and her family loved me, mostly her mother, as her father was standoffish as he was with everyone. It was a whirlwind romance. After 2.5 blissful years of overseas vacations, hiking trips and luxury vacations, I proposed to her. She said yes. I was over the moon. She took on all the planning for the 4 wedding. We talked about our futures together, buying a house, children, and family trips that we would take together. Then it happened. One evening after we both got home to our apartment, she was a little distant. I think I noticed it right away, as we were always very affectionate toward each other. This happened about once a week for the first month after the proposal, then it became more frequent. I would have been none the wiser, except that I used to listen to a lot of Reddit on YouTube, so I waited and observed. These bouts of ignoring me would only last a couple of hours. Then she would be right back to normal. But after 6 months, with the wedding in a year, she was like this almost every night. The sex was still great. My relationship with her parents was still great. But over Thanksgiving at her parents' home in Louisville, Kentucky, we lived just north of D.C. She was standoffish towards me in front of her mother. Now, her mother was a very observant woman. She pulled her daughter aside to talk, and I could hear them arguing. After some heated but muffled words, they returned to the rest of the family and carried on as if nothing was wrong. I figured I could ask her about it later, and did so. She was unwilling to talk about it and asked me to wait until we were home to discuss it. I agreed, as I loved her deeply and thought we could work through anything. The sex was still great. My relationship with her parents was still great, but over Thanksgiving at her parents' home in Louisville, Kentucky, we lived just north of D.C. She was standoffish towards me in front of her mother. Now, her mother was a very observant woman. She pulled her daughter aside to talk, and I could hear them arguing. After some heated but muffled words, they returned to the rest of the family and carried on as if nothing was wrong. I figured I could ask her about it later, and did so. She was unwilling to talk about it and asked me to wait until we were home to discuss it. I agreed, as I loved her deeply and thought we could work through anything. Was I wrong? The second weekend after Thanksgiving, she had a company Christmas party. I had planned on going but came down with food poisoning and had to back out. She had a girlfriend pick her up from our apartment, as they planned on drinking a lot and had a designated driver for the evening. We had planned for her to be out all night, so I told her to have a blast and I would see her in the morning. So, as I was puking my guts out and barely able to get off the toilet for more than 30 minutes, I grabbed my phone and watched her location. First, it was a restaurant, then the venue of the company party, then None of this alarmed me until I saw her phone stop at a downtown hotel. At this point, I was miserable in more ways than 3, projectile vomiting out of my butt, mouth, and now soul. I finally fell asleep due to sheer exhaustion at 2 a.m. At 7 a.m., I awoke and saw she was still at the hotel. At noon, she finally came home, and I was on the mend. She was affectionate, and I asked her about the previous night without mentioning anything about knowing her locations. She talked about the restaurant, party, and the bar, but then said she went to her girlfriend's house to crash for the evening, the first lie. For the next 3 months, she started working later and later, 3 to 4 days a week. As I began asking her about it, she became more and more defensive. I talked to her mom one evening when my fiancé didn't come home until late. I asked her mom about the Thanksgiving conversation, and she admitted that she suspected her daughter might be stepping out of our relationship based on her body language. She also mentioned that her daughter had been more distant with her in their weekly texting conversations. With all this speculation in my mind, I kept it to myself. 2 weeks later, I got a new project in my company that required me to fly to the Midwest Monday through Friday for the next 5 weeks, starting in 2 weeks. It came with an increase in salary, and as I broke the news to my fiancée, she seemed delighted. However, I suspected that her excitement was for different reasons, so I went online and ordered 4 motion-activated spy cameras for my apartment. I placed one in the living room/entry area, one in the kitchen, one in our bedroom, and one looking down our hallway. They were very small and connected to the internet via a hidden network, so they couldn't be spotted on the Wi-Fi network. I secured the cameras with a password, and during my first week away, she had girlfriends over for the first 2 nights and never worked late once. On the 3rd night, a guy came over and I was enraged. I sat in my hotel room screaming at the monitor and calling her every name in the book. Then they went all the way, first on the couch, then in our bed. She bent in ways for him I didn't know were possible. What was the worst part was that as I was watching them get intimate, I called her to see how her day went. She heard her phone ringing and held her hand up for him to stop interrupting their activity and answered the call. I asked why she was breathing heavily, and she said she was at the gym working out. As soon as the call was over, she went right back to what they were doing. When I got home on Friday evening, I ignored her and went straight to bed. Early on Saturday, I got up and went cycling. I was so upset that I didn't even realize I had biked over 50 miles from our apartment. The furthest I had biked before was 30 miles, but that day I went 105.6 miles. When I got back, absolutely exhausted, I showered. Then she and I went out that evening and had fun with our friends and had a lot to drink. Is it breakup sex when the one you're going to break up with is oblivious? I was bursting inside with heartbreak, anger, rage, and feelings of betrayal, all swirling around in my heart and mind. She, who used to be so attentive, was oblivious to all of this. It hurt so much because I loved her so much. I finally confided in one of our mutual friends, and he told me that they all knew about it for months. Finally, I was told they all felt sorry for me, but no one again said a damn thing to me. That's why they stopped inviting us out with them. I hadn't noticed it before, but I could look back and see that about 3 months prior, they gradually invited us less and less. So, I figured I would try to win her back. The next weekend, I planned the entire weekend as a complete indulgence for her in every way. We wined and dined, pampered ourselves with massages, and talked about future plans and how much I loved her. I knew I was starting to break through when, after her 4th glass of wine, she started to cry, and I could tell the guilt was surfacing. I asked her what was wrong, but she choked up every time she tried to speak. I then told her that if she had something in her past or was having some kind of conflict in her mind that she needed to discuss with me, I was more than willing to listen, and if forgiveness was needed, I was more than willing to forgive and move on. The only words that came out of her mouth were about how much she loved me. It actually hurt to hear that from her, as I now had 4 separate videos of her and the other guy in our apartment engaging in intimate activities. Over the next 8 weeks of traveling to the Midwest, the trips lasted for what would be 10 weeks, I recorded over 41 hours of her having a relationship with what I found out was her coworker. She never worked late once while I was gone. I tried every weekend to be extra attentive, and each week, she grew more and more distant. After observing this for 8 weeks, I was done. So, I devised a 12-step getaway plan. Gather evidence, get her out of the way to execute my plan. I scheduled a 2-week exclusive getaway trip for us at an all-inclusive resort in Barbados. She was ecstatic. Then a week before the trip, I claimed I had to back out and told her to take a friend. I knew it was over when she showed no disappointment that I couldn't go. She scheduled a coworker to go with her. Terminate our apartment lease, it would expire 3 days into her trip, and I was the sole signature on the lease. Find a job in another town. The company I'd been assisting in the Midwest had offered me a job with a slight increase in salary. Find a new place to live. I got an apartment in the when she is gone. Perform the following. Take her to the airport, go back home and pack all her things. Same day, Saturday. Get a new phone number, phone and email. Cancel all social media. Separate us completely in regard to finances. Withdrew all money from our joint accounts and then closed them. I put all her money in an envelope and packed it in her things. Have the movers pack all my things up and ship them west. Take all her things to her mother's house, 600 miles away. All my fiancé's belongings fit into the back and bed of my F-250 crew cab. Give her mother the evidence. Start my new life. I didn't want to do anything that was illegal, so I made sure that nothing of hers was missing. It was so hard to pack all her stuff nice and neatly away. I had never cried so hard in my life. I have read so many times on Reddit about significant others saying they will never do it again when caught, but they don't stop. My hope was that she would genuinely confess so we could forgive and move on. She never did. Twice, she came really close, but her secret was too hard for her to reveal. Tuesday morning, I left our apartment north of DC for the last time. Took 10 hours to get to her mom's house. What happened when I got there, I was not prepared for. I arrived at her mom's house around 8 o'clock in the evening. I figured she would be surprised to see me since I was coming down unannounced. Since they lived in a gated community, I had to buzz her house from the front gate, so she was waiting for me outside when I drove up. I could tell that she had been crying. When I walked up to see her, I asked her what was wrong, and she hugged me, bawling that she thought her husband was cheating on her with a much younger, skinnier, and prettier woman. Dumbfounded, I just held her for what was probably 10 minutes. She soaked my right shoulder with her tears and snot. When she finally composed herself, I asked if we could have a conversation. We went inside, and I inquired about her husband's whereabouts. She indicated that he had claimed to be going fishing with his friends at a remote cabin an hour away. Then she added he dislikes fishing. She provided me with all the signs she had noticed, and apparently this had been going on for about a year. So, after doing some research, we found a credit card charge for a stay at a 5-star hotel that was only 20 minutes away. A phone call later confirmed that her husband was indeed there for a 4-night stay with his mistress. 2 peas in a pod, I said. What? She responded. 2 peas in a pod, I repeated. Your husband is cheating on you, and your daughter is being unfaithful to me. That's why I came here, to drop off her belongings and move somewhere else. I showed her the evidence in a binder containing screen captures I had collected. After examining the first few pages, she looked at me in disbelief. We both hugged and cried for a good 30 minutes. At that point, she told me to stop crying and looked at me, saying, well, tonight there's nothing we can do about it except for you and me to have a few glasses of Moscato and spend time in every room of the house. She grabbed 2 wine glasses and a bottle of Moscato wine, heading out to their private pool deck, asking, are you coming out here, or are you going to seek revenge? I won't go into much detail, but that night and for the next 3 days we spent intimate time together nonstop. I explored every aspect of her beautiful body. I must have made love to her over 25 times during that period. After those days were over, we said a passionate goodbye, and I drove to my new destination. She kept me informed about everything that happened when my now ex-fiancé returned. The day my fiancé got back was quite dramatic. I had canceled my phone the morning of the day she returned, so when her plane landed and she called for a ride, it indicated that the phone was disconnected. Apparently, she had her lover take her home. He dropped her off and left. When she reached the door, a strange couple, the new tenants, answered it, and she freaked out. I can't tell you how many times she tried to call me because again, the number was no longer valid. She went to stay with her girlfriends for a while, since her coworker was already married. When she called her mom in a panic, her mom told her that I had come down and dropped off all her belongings and mentioned that all her money was down there as well, 600 miles away. Her mom didn't tell her about our relationship, but did inform her that she knew she was being unfaithful to me. I had found a new job, a place to stay, and a new career far away from her. And her mother was separating from her father due to infidelity. Apparently, she cried for days and took a week off from work. However, She eventually found comfort in the arms of her married lover. Her mom never revealed my whereabouts to her. I had completely cut off that part of my life. The only connection I had to my past was through my ex-fiancé's mom, and she has kept our secret to this day. Here is a little bit of what happened afterward. As for the timing of the events that allowed me to leave her, a lot of it was extremely fortunate timing. The lease ending, the successful job search, and the phone plan ending. Things could have unfolded much differently if any of those factors had been different. My ex-fiancé's mother, EFM, stayed in touch with me for several months afterward, as we both experienced the loss of our relationships and shared a form of revenge against our significant others. However, neither of our respective significant others found out about what happened between EFM and me. EFM eventually visited me after 7 months in my new location, but much to the disappointment of many of you, we only talked. We both actually regretted what we had done together but acknowledged that it was in the past and in the heat of the moment. Days of heat and moments. She mentioned that her daughter knew that she, EFM, knew my whereabouts and was very upset that she wouldn't reveal my location. EFM asked if she could tell my ex-fiancé where I was and provide a way for her to contact me, but I requested that she not tell her, as I had moved on to my new life. EFM and I had extensive discussions about the possibility of her and her significant other staying together and working things out. EFM shared that her husband was extremely remorseful and came clean about everything. She said it was a lot to take in, and I asked him what he was going to do to earn back her trust. He gave her all his digital passwords and allowed her access to everything he had ever done to harm their marriage. EFM ended up being very angry but recognized that he was genuinely trying to repair the marriage. EFM mentioned that her forgiveness would come with time, but trust would take longer. What caused him to snap back into reality was when she confronted him about the affair and showed him evidence of what his daughter had done to me. EFM was an amazing woman in every way imaginable. She also stated that if he strayed outside the marriage, she would be allowed to do so as well. He picked up on the again phrase and asked her what she meant. She told him that as soon as she found out he was cheating, she had relations with the first eligible man she found. He was devastated. EFM said they cried a lot and agreed to separate for a short time to give each other space to articulate their thoughts and determine if they both wanted to fight for the marriage. Ultimately, they attended marriage counseling, and as of May 2020 were still together. As for my ex-fiancée, she was devastated by what I had done to her. When she finally went to her parents to gather her belongings, she was presented with evidence of the affair and was deeply embarrassed. EFM had edited the binder so that when her father saw it, he would not see inappropriate pictures of his daughter. Regardless, my ex-fiancée was crushed. She didn't find out that her mother had my contact information until months later. She begged her mother for my information, which strained their relationship. However, her mother also told her that if she attempted to find and contact me, all the evidence would be released on the internet by me. This insistence on my ex-fiancé's part prompted her to come and see me. She was also upset about her parents having difficulties in their marriage. According to EFM, my ex-fiancée was depressed for several months and sought counseling. She immediately ended the affair with her coworker once she returned from her parents' place in Louisville, Kentucky, and began looking for a new job. Recently, I found out that she got married and has 2 beautiful twin daughters with a good man. She still lives in the DC area and works from home, enjoying her new life. According to EFM, I'm glad that she was able to turn her life around and find happiness. I recently destroyed all the incriminating evidence I had concerning my ex-fiancée, as I didn't want to be the person who would hold her hostage for the rest of her life. I asked EFM to convey this to my ex-fiancée. If I had been on the receiving end of that information, it would have caused me many sleepless nights. As for myself, let's just say I am content with my current life. EFM and I initially talked every few months, but now we communicate once or twice a year, usually with brief updates on life's minor changes. The only unanswered question for me is whether if EFM and her husband were able to repair their marriage, my ex-fiancée and I could have done the same, but I never gave it a chance. One can only speculate. Our lives have taken us on vastly different paths now. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, If you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I was discriminated against my entire life because of my golden child sister. She now tried walking down the aisle at my wedding, and I finally got revenge. So ever since I could remember, my parents loved my sister more. I don't mean in subtle ways either. If my sister accused me of something, they'd believe it and punish me. If I accused her, they wouldn't believe even if there was undeniable proof. They'd still give her a lesser punishment and try to find a way to scold me in tandem. My birthday cake had to be a flavor she wanted. Hers did not, and my parents always denied knowing I didn't like that type of cake. They always bought her a bit more than for me. We went to where she wanted, even if it was an event that should be about me. My sister grew up spoiled and didn't like me, just used me as a punching bag. At first, she mostly ignored me, but then it got really bad when we were young teens. I'm not sure what the cause and effect are, but she found herself with no friends and her behavior got worse. Did her friends move? Did they ditch her because she was mean? I don't know, because we were never close. And my parents loved to boast about her achievements but never ever mentioned any issues, whereas with me they loved to bring out any flaws of mine constantly as teasing material. I only knew she had none because we went to the same school and I noticed her no longer walking around with people. Anyway, she had no friends. I did. I used to be decently popular. My sister realized that, and suddenly I stopped being the occasional punching bag to a hated person she needed to take down at all times. She started accusing me of more stuff. She accused us, my friends, of more stuff. My parents stopped allowing me to hang out with anyone. The excuses ranging from, "They're not good people," according to your sister, to "Why are you trying to leave us? Why can't you be like your sister and enjoy family time?" What saved me from complete isolation was extended family. Most of my family lived in the same hometown, and I got along with my cousins despite some age difference. At one gathering, they invited me over to something, I don't remember what, and I sadly replied I'm not allowed to go anywhere. When asked why, my kid self with no filter replied that it was because I wasn't allowed to have friends since my sister didn't have any. Well, that reached the adults who apparently tore my parents apart later. I was scolded for lying and grounded as if I had anywhere to go for a month. But after that, they allowed me some leeway, so it was worth it. And my sister changed schools. I guess the humiliation of extended family knowing her social status was bad and she demanded to be changed. And my parents immediately obliged, even though it cost them more since the school was further away. But she made friends at the new school. However, she never went back to the previous status quo of mostly ignoring me. I guess having felt the power of how badly she could screw with me and anger that I told family she had no friends, she never let me go. My life was still bad. Her friends would come over and bully me, and my parents called it light teasing. I never called friends over because my parents were awful hosts to them, or my sister would accuse them of taking stuff and they'd believe it. I did become close to my cousins though, since my parents never dared do any of that to family. And then I got my first boyfriend. I didn't want to bring him home at all, but my parents insisted. Well, at one point we were separated and he came to find me to tell me my sister was flirting with him. By which he meant, she came over with skimpy clothing, batting her eyelashes really badly, and started telling him how bad I was and how good she was. He was irked and ran off to find me. Of course, my sister told my parents a different tale. That my BF had instead tried to flirt with her, but she naturally refused since how could she do that to me? Guess who my parents believed? Now, my BF wasn't perfect, but I immediately believed him for a mean reason. But remember that back then I was a teen and suffering from the unfair bad treatment. I was very resentful and moody and now hated my sister as much as she hated me. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about looks. I hadn't mentioned them yet because they weren't relevant. My parents were / are overweight, and since they like showing love via food, giving you more food, buying treats, etc., my sister was / is also overweight, whereas I was / am not. In fact, I've always been kinda skinny because punishment often included no treats or snacks. Obviously, weight isn't what matters, personality is, but my sister even then was already rude and spoiled. Even her flirting attempts were bad because she never learned to work for anything since she could demand and my parents would deliver. Added to that the fact that she didn't look like some sexy model, even my self-conscious teen self didn't believe my BF would try and cheat on me with her. Anyway, my parents prohibited me from dating such a horrible boy. I did try to keep going in secret, but it was hard, and the relationship ended. I did get another, but again, my sister accused him of flirting with her when he refused her advances. Again, my parents believed her. I tried pointing out how this happened again, but they decided that meant I was incapable of making good choices and kept picking bad boyfriends. The relationship couldn't handle the Romeo-Juliet situation and fizzled out again. I would eventually get called a whore in high school as I was fine with making out with boys and such but refused to have relationships. Thankfully, it never got back to my sister or parents. My sister did bring one boyfriend home during all this time. He was paraded with pride, and my parents spent every second telling me how good he was and why couldn't I be like my sister and find myself someone like that, until he stopped showing up, and suddenly he was a conniving bastard that tricked my sister. Oh well. And the unequal treatment continued. At this time, she had more spending money. Her curfews were much better than mine. She was free to go anywhere at any time while I couldn't. If I pointed it out, my parents would say it's because she's older, but when I reached that age, I still didn't have the same treatment she had. And when pointed out, they deny they ever said that. Her claim it was because I couldn't be trusted like she was, using my sister's accusations against my BF and friends as proof of my bad judgment. Time goes by and it's time for my sister to graduate. She was accepted into a college, not a very well-regied one, and she had no scholarship or anything. Again, because only her achievements were told to me, I don't know which colleges she even tried for, so I can't say how badly she was rejected. I do know her grades were bad in school though, because whenever she got a B we would celebrate. I would usually get good grades, but my parents refused to celebrate, claiming since I always got those, what was there to celebrate? My parents naturally made a lot of fanfare and told her they'd pay for everything. I was relieved she'd be going away. Not that it made my life any easier. She'd always come home every other weekend, and somehow stuff kept missing from her room, or some other issue she'd think of to make my life miserable. My curfews were still strict, etc. Eventually my mom came to talk to me about my impending graduation. I'm only a year younger than my sister. She told me since they were paying for my sister's college, they had no money to pay for mine. So, it would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation, and waiting until my sister finished uni to see if they could afford something for me. Oh, and if I decided to stay at home, I'd have to pay for all my stuff, part of the bills and rent. I pointed out I could get student loans. Mom said yes, except no, that is because they were so caring towards me, and I had such bad judgment, they would decide if a college was worth my getting in debt or not. I'm not sure how they'd stop me from getting loans, but I didn't ask. Scholarships weren't mentioned. They had no idea what my grades were anymore and never believed in my capabilities anyway. I didn't bat an eyelid. I simply said okay. My mom clearly didn't expect that and kept pestering. Maybe she hoped I'd throw a tantrum so they'd have an excuse to not ever pay for my college. But I said nothing, except I understood their position, thanked them for caring, and that was that. My dad later tried the same, but I also refused to be emotional. You see, after a whole lifetime of their terrible parenting, I never had any expectations towards my education. I knew they would find an excuse to not pay for mine and make my life miserable. I never believed they would eventually pay it if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out. My friendships were slim, so I had a lot of time to study, and study I did because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came and I worked my ass off and got a scholarship. Not to anywhere like Ivy League or anything like law or medical school, but it was a good enough course in a decent college with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to stop me via parents, I put my achievement on social media at the same time I told them. Even forced myself to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't forbid me from going as they'd have to explain to family why not. Initially, they were even a little proud and boasting about it. And then I guess my sister got to them, and they changed gears and even asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. They let slip my sister wasn't doing well in college, and since she was smarter and had better judgment than me, I'd suffer worse. I obviously stuck to my guns. They weren't happy but couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I started being happy. I still contacted my parents and visited on holidays and such, but since they refused to pay for anything, I could excuse not going a lot due to money. During this time, I avoided introducing any man to them, and my sister stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because again they'd have made a fanfare about it. Moved back home paying no bills or rent, but it's different, my parents said, and started working at the same company as my mom, obviously thanks to my mom pulling strings. This was all sold to me as a source of pride. Oh well, almost there, I promise. I met my husband around this time. You know those people that say that if I was in X situation I'd have done something? My husband is the type that really does. I'm the person that is meek and a doormat in any situation, and then can't sleep at night wishing I had done something, had thought of something witty to say, etc. I'm the person that can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband is the guy that claps back immediately. He loves drama and that he loves to resolve it. He's the guy that if he doesn't immediately reply to a slight, you better start worrying because he won't forgive and forget. He's just doing something worse for revenge. He's the one that wanted me to post here and wanted to post on a nuclear revenge board too, but decided what we did wasn't nuclear. People were baffled I got together with him, but just because I was incapable, thanks to my upbringing probably, of acting like him, it didn't mean I didn't like it. I love that my husband does what I can't, and he treats people well as long as they do the same to him. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget, as we'd rather spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. As for where to do it, since his family was spread out and mine was still mostly concentrated in my hometown, we decided to do it there. We weren't living too far off either, so we could take some long trips during the weekends to manage stuff. Plus there was some work flexibility, so we could stay in my hometown for a bit too if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. Well, at this point, my parents naturally demanded they meet my man. I wanted to grow a spine and refuse, but was having a hard time. The distance had made me think maybe my parents weren't so bad. Well, my husband looked like I canceled Christmas when I told him I would at least ensure they were never alone with him. See, he had been getting ready for this. He even bought a high-quality recorder he could hide in a pocket to record it all. He was stoked thinking of all the ways he could refuse my sister's advances, insult her, and then spread the recording of her attempts to my family. So off he went alone and excited to meet them and came back later euphoric. Babe, you won't believe the awful thing they wanted. Babe, we can EF them over so bad. There's so many possibilities. I was confused and wanted to hear the recording, but he smartly told me it was better to listen to him first or else I'd misunderstand him. Well, he went there, and instead of the flirting, my parents and my sister sat him down after some grumbling about not being okay with him, my judgment, etc. They proclaimed they were willing to pay for my wedding on one condition. My sister would walk down the aisle on my wedding first in a wedding dress. Their excuses were that it wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first, so it was only fair if my sister had at least the experience of it on my venue, with pictures being taken and the dress, and she'd have a cake later too, etc. My husband will now type his part. A vengeful husband here. Hell hath no fury like a pro-revenge, instant karma, nuclear revenge lurker when his beloved is scorned. That said, as much as my wife, yes, she's my wife now, paints me as this quick-witted dude, I admit my neurons all but short-circuited when those folks legit suggested that shit like some sort of great gift. Even Troy would rather take in the horse a second time, methinks. Alas, after my brain rebooted, I did have a whole less catalog of insults about to spew out, but something in my soul whispered in my ear like the devil. String these shitheads along. So I said I needed to think, see how my wife, back then fiancée, would react and then ran out of there before I could give away my nefarious plans. Back to me, the wife. So my husband sincerely recounted how my parents wanted even my wedding to be about my sister with a grin on his face and had the recording to prove it. I was shocked. The distance had softened how bad they treated me, and I thought even they wouldn't go so far. Thankfully, my husband's insistence on the angle of revenge helped me not go to a bad headspace. We had a blast thinking up ways to screw them over. This from ridiculously outlandish to what we thought was feasible. We then called his much more level-headed brother. When we decided on a plan, it involved having 2 venue addresses, giving them the wrong one, etc. Well, level-headed brother scolded us for it. While he acknowledged he would never be able to convince us from retaliation, he at least showed us something like that would be hard to pull off. Some of our other ideas were also at danger of getting sued, so we eventually settled for the most benign plan. Act like we agreed, but then hire security and don't let her in. Obviously, if that was all, it wouldn't be pro-revenge. The rest is all mostly my husband, but he wants me to do the honors, so here goes. Just important to mention, everything he did was previously discussed with me and were our mutual ideas. He went back to my parents, said he probed and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he didn't see the issue and not wanting family to fall apart would be down to helping them do it. He pointed out I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised with it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of all the people. On the other hand, marriage is a big thing, so who knew if I'd lash out? Thus, he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff. This way I would feel even more pressure to not say anything, as not only would we be public, well, with our families there, but I'd be grateful to the help they gave, and that did myfy me. He said my parents looked surprised by my grown sister, starting skipping with joy, literally so like a kid. So it was accepted. Important. My husband also claimed that due to some bad judgment and boyfriends in the past, these words were all my idea, and I'm so proud of using their words against them, lol. I was distrustful and controlling and liked to check his phone and stuff to ensure he wasn't cheating on me. As such, it was imperative that nothing of this plan was ever put in any writing. For any discussion pertaining to my sister walking down the aisle before me, he'd go over to their house to talk. And so began the months of deception where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, and my husband and I were milking them. How? Well, rather than pay for the wedding, they'd lay low. Of course, my parents wanted input in everything. Some stuff that meant a lot to me, the songs and color palette. My husband would convince them to let it go to keep me in line, but since we never really cared for the ceremony to begin with, everything else was game, or so they thought. What we did was thus. We'd go say to check the drink and menu options. We then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to also try it out. Then sigh and say, "It's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill, so we wouldn't get the best options." Cue my sister demanding my parents pay for the best. My parents would then tell me not to worry, and they'd pay for the most expensive. Same was done with photographer, flowers. My husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, then sadly expressed how I wanted some other tasteless flowers. Cue my parents telling me they wanted us to go with said flowers, and they'd pay for it. Wedding dress. We hit a minor snag here. My parents wanted me to use a hideous dress. Okay, not outright hideous, but it wasn't my style and wouldn't look that good on me. We had planned on saying yes, then simply not using it, but my mom sent me a message about it, so there'd be proof I said okay. We had to go with me refusing in text and standing my ground. My husband went over there and said he'd see what he could do. My sister suggested ruining my desired dress so I'd be forced to wear the other one. He pretended to agree. During all this time, they really kept communications outside any text. We made sure that it happened by, when my sister tried messaging my husband, have me reply to her. This solidified the uncontrolling and neurotic claims my husband was making, so they believed it and never risked anything in writing. And maybe some people might not like the thought of their partner going around and talking badly about them to family, but I'm such a doormat that the thought of being painting as this controlling and dangerous is extremely funny to me, and I egged him on to do it. I guess I have a warped sense of humor, lol. Oh, and my sister did try to flirt with him, but he acted conflicted, also to really sell that he was with them. My husband would pretend to tell them things without my knowledge, but he never told them we hired security. It was really funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus cost on our honeymoon, having this extravagant, expensive wedding and barely spending a dime. We called it back pay for emotional damages from my parents, lol. I think my husband, okay, he just confirmed I'm right, lol, was enjoying the whole tricking them more than planning our wedding. I didn't think it was possible to witness a guy beaming at the thought of wasting his whole Saturday doing a car trip to discuss wedding details with his in-laws. But here we are. Soon the day came. The plan my parents/sister/husband had come up with was, wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that precise time to avoid me seeing her and trying to stop it, and walk down the aisle. By the time I heard what happened, it'd be too late to do anything. As for my dress, we saved some of the leftover fabric for my dress alterations, and my husband took that to my parents' place. Sister still lives with them even now, and showed them as proof he'd ruined the dress, then said he had to go back to me as I was raging and he needed to calm me down. He'd see them at the wedding. We made sure to keep our actual security hidden at first. As the guests and my parents arrived, all they could see was a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents arrived and sat down did we bring out security, a guy that looked like a bodyguard. We told him to not allow anyone, my sister, in, and even agreed on paying a handsome tip if he didn't reveal we told him that. Soon the time arrived. My parents got a text. My sister was less than 5 minutes away, so my dad went and told people to start. My bridesmaids had been told to follow his lead beforehand, so they obeyed without checking with me. After they all went down and took their places, my dad stood up at the entrance as if waiting for me. During this, a friend not in the wedding party texted me to get ready. This because if my husband or bridesmaids etc. took out a phone and started texting, people might notice. This friend was in on the plan. She's my husband's friend, as willing to help stir drama as he is, and didn't care about being a bridesmaid or anything. Well, as soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song started playing. The doors open and I come in. My dad looked aghast at me being there. He tried glancing behind me, but you can't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he couldn't see what happened to my sister. And then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID and it was her. He just left me there with a mumbled something came up. There were gasps and confusion all around. The friend in on it loudly asked what happened. I lied and in a teary voice said he told me it wasn't supposed to be me there. It's not what he said, but my husband and I agreed that if he dared leave me I should say that to make him look the worst possible. As for the tears, I wish I could say it was just my stellar acting. But no. Despite everything, a part of me didn't think he'd go as far as abandon me there, that the sister thing wasn't true, but an elaborate joke. I don't know. I was hurt. Still am. So I was sincerely trying not to cry. The friend then loudly went, "What did he mean by, it shouldn't be you?" So that as many people as possible could hear and spread it. Then I will go and check, and ran off. We decided to do this to make her create hell with the security and stop my dad from coming back and stopping the ceremony or something. At some point my mom also left. At this point my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned he might need to. Watching him run desperately to me helped me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people discussed what happened. Some apparently left to check too. When I reached my husband though, all was well. He made me feel better, joking my sad face was so real I deserved an Oscar and, don't worry. He'd rake them over the coals for what they did. We got married without a hitch. My parents didn't come back. I did notice a lot of people leaving then coming back during the party, but no one dared tell me what was happening. Someone did come and whisper in my husband's ear, and he went out. He came back after a while with a thunderous expression, but whispered in my ear he needed to go hide somewhere before he broke character and started smiling. Oh. Well, what happened is it worked. The following is the summed account from friends, family, the security guy and my husband that I received afterwards. My sister did arrive in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in for our agreement. He claimed she must be in the wrong venue because there was already a bride. And yes, we tipped him really well as promised. My dad went there and tried threatening him with police, claiming he never heard of him so he couldn't be working there. The security agreed to the police since he was hired by us and doing his job. My dad realized by then it would be too late and tried to demand he let my sister in. At this point the friend came over, started shouting and insulting my sister and asking what was going on. Basically stalling. My mom soon came and eventually other people. At this point the wedding plan was bust. All my parents could do now is damage control. As everyone that learned about it was aghast, they try and pull it and screaming and berating them. The three naturally said it wasn't a secret and threw my husband under the bus. At this point, my husband was summoned. When he came over, he put on his best look of confusion and denied. To quote him, gaslight, gay, keep girl boss all. He denied having ever agreed to something so ridiculous. When they insisted he did, he demanded proof, and of course they couldn't produce any. All text exchanges they could produce were about normal wedding decisions. My sister was crying and apparently sat on the floor kicking her legs like a kid. My dad looked like he'd beat my husband, but security and other people held him back. Of course, they said they had no proof because my husband told them not to text. My husband laughed and said, "Wow, how convenient, huh?" Then again, repeated why would he ever agree to something so effed up, tore them a new one about being awful parents, then said he wasn't going to let their stupid plans and lying get in the way of his wedding and went back to me. No one believed them. The venue had cameras, but they refused to show me the recording as that was only for security purposes, but some people filmed parts of it. Watching my parents and sister get ripped apart by any and everyone that came out to check the drama was delicious. After years and years of being accused of stuff and not believed, to watch them have a taste was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was crying. My dad kept changing from purple to white. My sister was still on the floor crying and screaming. They kept insisting on that my husband was in on it, but people kept asking why would my husband agree? Why was there no proof? Why did they want my sister to do this to my wedding? And they had no good answer to any of it. Eventually, they were told to leave and had no choice but to do so. My dad apparently had to drag my sister up as she refused to leave the ground. Again, people said nothing to me all night. I guess they wanted to spare me, and maybe it's because I was the bride and not just a guest for once, but it did feel like everyone was making extra effort to be nice, positive, and excited about everything. My husband says all the expensive things they were eating/drinking certainly helps, lol. We had a blast. My husband maintained the forced angry face for only a short while before breaking out in smiles again. After that, we went to the hotel to catch some sleep before going to our honeymoon. Speaking of which, my parents did try to pay for our plane tickets, but we thought that was risky as they could try and cancel them or something, so we refused. Of course, since that whole thing, the three have tried to contact me. I've refused calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. A smart thing because my sister did eventually message me. I won't repeat it as it was very unhinged and didn't make much sense, but the important part was that she blamed me for her humiliation, called my husband a two-faced snake that fooled them for months. He wants to print and put that on our wall, lol, and hoped but was also certain it had happened that I'd get cheated on by him. She did also suggest he was cheating on me with her, actually. My husband took my phone, screenshot the call logs, screenshot my sister's message screenshot some messages of my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and sent it all to my family group chat. And sent screenshots of messages to him where they called him names and threatened him, but he kept up the "you're delusional, I never agreed to anything" shtick, and even threatened to sue them for defamation and harassment. He wrote a message in said group chat begging my family for help as I was now being harassed by them constantly. He begged family to help stop them from trying to ruin my honeymoon now that they had failed to ruin my wedding. Then finished neatly with a request that they don't share our locations to avoid my parents sending my sister over, and then claiming he had somehow agreed to pretend to F her in our honeymoon suite. Lol. My family assured him they'd take care of it. And indeed, since then we've had silence. My husband is a little disappointed my sister didn't disobey, so he could tattle again while tearing her a new shit. We'll see if it'll last. All in all, while I obviously would prefer to have a normal loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life, they not only failed to ruin something meaningful to me, but I got them back. Extra info. Do I know why they treat me like this? I've been asked this question a lot, so I assume you all will think the same. I have wondered this all my life, and I still don't know. I tried asking when I was young, but they denied any difference and scolded me for acting spoiled, so I quit trying. I've thought of so many possibilities, but based on my observations, I think it's this. I was unplanned. They took a while to have my sister, so she was not only wanted but also like a miracle child after so long. However, given our age difference is quite small, I think they didn't expect to have a kid so soon or easily and didn't use adequate protection way too soon after my sister's birth and maybe didn't notice my mom was pregnant until too late. So they were saddled with an unplanned baby while still dealing with a newborn, and they're not that well off, so having the extra expense likely didn't help. So they resented me, but that's my conjecture. Regardless, I've accepted the answer won't truly matter. What they did to me was unwarranted no matter what. Did they really think this would work? My husband and I talked, and we have the theory that they never wanted to do this at all. We think my sister threw a tantrum over me getting married first when she barely gets dates, and they gave my husband that outlandish proposition as in, They didn't want to pay for my wedding and didn't think we'd accept, or that it would even look good for them to do it. But by suggesting it and being refused, they could look like the good guys to my sister while having an excuse to not give me a dime. But then my husband accepted it, and they couldn't backtrack or else risk my sister turning on them. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend while I was laying next to them. Hey everyone, something really upsetting happened to me yesterday, and I'm feeling quite overwhelmed. I had been in a relationship with my boyfriend for almost 3 years, and I also had a friend whom I had known for nearly 2 years. Yesterday, I decided to go out for a drink with my girlfriend to spend a nice evening together. While we were hanging out, my boyfriend texted and asked if he could join us. Both my girlfriend and I agreed, and he came over and we all had a good time. Later on, we headed back to my friend's studio apartment. Along the way, I opened up about some personal insecurities, like feeling foolish at times because of my hair color and expressing my discomfort with the idea of threesomes, as it made me feel gross and uncomfortable. Once we arrived at the apartment, we watched a series together. I must have fallen asleep at some point, and when I woke up, I noticed my girlfriend was continuously rubbing my boyfriend's belly. I immediately expressed my discomfort to my boyfriend, but I eventually fell back asleep. My girlfriend was also getting ready for bed, and I noticed she had changed into a silk kimono, which was unusual since she had been wearing an oversized t-shirt and pants earlier. A red flag for me. I was quite exhausted, so I drifted off to sleep again. Suddenly, I woke up sensing movement on the bed and hearing heavy breathing. I was paralyzed. Realizing what was happening, I went to the bathroom, trying to gather my thoughts and figure out what to do next. Eventually, I made the decision to pack my things and leave. While I was packing, my boyfriend went to the bathroom, and I confronted my friend, calling her a disrespectful person. She responded with a feeble apology, but it didn't mean much to me. My boyfriend entered the room, and I ended our relationship on the spot. I swiftly left with my belongings in tow. He followed me, pleading to take me home and ensure my safety, but I refused. As I walked home, he continued chasing after me, expressing how stupid he had been and how he never wanted to lose me. It was the first time I saw him cry, but by that point, I couldn't bring myself to care. I'm at a loss for what to do now. I see my friend regularly at school since she's in my class, and I don't know how to handle the situation. I am consumed with anger and confusion. Update. My BF, 22M, cheated on me, 18F, with my best friend, 19F, while I was laying next to them. Hey everyone. First off, I want to give a big shout out to all of you for the amazing support you've shown me. Seriously, it means the world to me. Now, let's dive into the story. So, I went over to my boyfriend's place to grab my stuff, and boy, did things get intense. We started talking, and before I knew it, I was yelling at the top of my lungs. But here's the juicy part. I finally got to hear a side of the story. Apparently, it all started while we were chilling and binge-watching a series. Both my girlfriend and boyfriend were into vaping, although I never really got the appeal. Anyway, turns out my girlfriend has this knack for mooching off others and being broke all the time, and guess what? She even used my boyfriend's vape. While they were puffing away, something fishy was going on. As my girlfriend got busy adjusting her blouse, my boyfriend couldn't help but notice. And here comes the sneakiness. She strategically placed the vape between her breasts, making it impossible for him to ignore. To top it off, she kept unbuttoning her blouse, making sure he got an eyeful. Poor guy had to rescue the vape from its booby trap every time. Then, she was rubbing my BF chest, and that's when I woke up and caught them red-handed. Making the story funny is my coping mechanism. I'm still dying inside. Now, I confronted my boyfriend right then and there. As soon as my girlfriend went to the bathroom, I decided to not make a big scene about it and let things cool down a bit. But then I noticed something peculiar. My girlfriend had changed into a kimono, and let me tell you, she hardly ever wears that thing. Normally, it's oversized t-shirts and pants for her. Anyway, I was too exhausted to dwell on it, so I passed out again. Little did I know, while I was sleeping like a log, my girlfriend was turning on the charm. She dropped that kimono, revealing more of herself to my boyfriend. She made a move, tried to plant a kiss on him, but he initially rejected her advances. However, persistence paid off and he eventually gave in. Things heated up as she started pleasuring herself right in front of him, even guiding his hand along her body, and that's when I woke up, feeling and hearing every damn thing. After my intense conversation with my boyfriend, I couldn't keep the story to myself. I ended up sharing it with my entire class, so now everyone knew what had happened. Fast forward to the day I had to face her again, and there was something I needed to retrieve from her: the Apple Pencil. And surprisingly, the first thing she handed over was my Apple Pencil. The class began, and conversations buzzed among my classmates. Suddenly, someone commented, "That's one messed up story you've got there." It was my cue to speak up. "You think that's messed up?" I retorted, and the discussion kicked off. People chimed in, expressing their thoughts. She first said that it was our business and others shouldn't get involved. However, she herself admitted that she would do it again, even with another best friend. It was a shocking revelation, making her come across as a truly messed up individual. Now here's where things get interesting. Unbeknownst to me, my story had made its way to TikTok and was spreading like wildfire. I was surprised but secretly grateful for the exposure. Fast forward to today, she returned to school, acting as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't done anything wrong. However, many people from our school had already seen the TikTok, and it had quickly become the talk of the town. The best part was seeing her discomfort. We had a movie outing for school, and the topic of conversation revolved around my story. It was an incredible feeling, knowing that everyone knew the truth. She sat alone at the front of the cinema, and it was satisfying to witness her isolation. Unfortunately, she later joined our group, showing a surprising amount of audacity. She had even shared a version of the story with a few of her friends, albeit leaving out some crucial details to save herself from the drama. She claimed she was forced into the situation, but based on what I had seen, heard, and knew about this friend, I found it hard to believe her excuses. At this point, I'm contemplating exposing her name on Reddit and TikTok and revealing her true nature. She acts all high and mighty, pretending not to care and even taking pride in her actions, but I refuse to let this slide. It's time to confront her and make sure she faces the consequences of her actions. I want to clarify that while I don't solely blame her for what happened, her behavior in handling the situation has been incredibly nasty. On the other hand, when it comes to my ex-boyfriend, I can see genuine remorse in his actions. This realization has taken away the satisfaction I once felt in seeking revenge or taking further action against him. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Fiancé's depression caused him to ghost me for weeks before our wedding. I had a total meltdown when he bailed right as we were signing the papers. I 28F. I'm getting married today to my fiancé, 30M. It's the legal document signing and our ceremony is on Saturday. I haven't slept in 24 hours. I just am feeling so much anxiety. For reference, we were together/living together for about 3 years before becoming long distance for 1.5 years. I'm back in the country for a week to visit him and family and to have our wedding. For the last month, he has been ghosting me for some times, even weeks at a time. I know it's because he's going through a mental health crisis, but no matter how much I tell him his actions are causing me pain and straining our communication, he can't change. When he goes through rough times, he absolutely shuts down for everyone, especially me. It hurts so much every time, knowing that even the person he says is his best friend and future wife he doesn't trust or respect enough to share or ease his pain. I thought coming back to the country and the marriage would wake him up from his ghosting tendencies this past month. But it's not. He had a very important meeting at work yesterday that either meant he'd get a raise or be unemployed, and now I don't hear anything from him at all. He's ignoring my calls, he's ignoring my texts, and there are red receipts, so I know it's intentionally ignored. It's the morning of, and we are literally set to sign our marriage paperwork in a few hours from now, but I was up all night because I can't shake the anxiety that this isn't what he wants, that he is just doing this to appease me, despite this being a joint decision. I still can't even get a hold or reach him. I try so hard to communicate everything with him, but this hurts me deeply, down to my core. Part of me wants to drive over to his apartment and beat his door down and just demand answers as to how he could treat someone he claims he loves this way. But I know he'd just shut down further, say he's sorry, and then bury himself deeper into his guilt and depression. How can I be supportive through his mental health crisis while also keeping firm on that this is some disrespectful and harmful behavior that is absolutely unacceptable in my opinion? When we were about to be long distance, he begged me to try it out because I knew his inability to properly communicate his feelings would be miserable over long distance, but he begged me and promised he would change. I would say he did improve, but if this last month has shown me anything, it's that I'm about to marry someone who has no qualms and sees no consequence in ghosting your spouse for weeks at a time. This whole thing gives me so much anxiety. I have no idea what to do. Any advice on how to calm my anxiety or maybe try to be more supportive to coax him out of the horrid way his depressive episode is manifesting would be greatly appreciated. Before I forget, yes, of course, I've tried to get him to see a therapist or get on medication for years. There is basically a 0% chance that if it's coming from me or anyone in my family, he would ever listen to that advice. It's incredibly frustrating and not an option that I can even bring up with him anymore without the conversation devolving and him shutting me out even further. I will not be tolerating or responding to any accusations of him cheating or people just saying don't marry him. He is loyal but has a multitude of mental health issues, and I will marry him regardless of what anyone says on the internet. I just want some advice is all. TLDR. My fiancé keeps ghosting me for weeks at a time, and he's doing it again even on the day we are getting married, which is causing me insane anxiety. Edit. I won't be reading anything anymore and please stop messaging me. If you see a woman who is genuinely struggling with something and clearly has no one else to turn to for advice other than random people on the internet, and your response is to ridicule her and call her an idiot, then congratulations. My last idea of seeking help has failed. Clearly, I had no one else to go to. It's my wedding day, and I'm on Reddit. I don't know why I expected anything less than hate messages and ridicule. Maybe there isn't some magic way to help him through this period of grief, but I didn't think I deserved to be sent all these cruel messages so instantly. To the people messaging me and calling me stupid, idiotic, doormat, and that I deserve whatever unhappy life awaits me, you've won. Comment where Op has replied. Comment 1. He's been ghosting you for the last month and you thought marriage would fix this. You don't want anyone here to tell you not to marry him when that's the most logical and smart decision here. You've created your own misery and are determined to continue doing so. What do you want from us? We can't make him unhost you and we can't make you feel better about this decision you know is dumb as hell. You have a man with mental health problems that refuses to get help that's causing severe relationship issues and you're willingly signing yourself up, aligning yourself legally to have more of these problems till death do you part. When you have kids and he ghosts you, then what are you going to do? I hope you get what you deserve from this situation, whatever that entails. Opie. This marriage has been planned for much longer than just the last month. It wasn't some solution I created by myself and it isn't no contact for the whole month. Just a week of no contact before he comes back and apologizes for the absence due to unavoidable life events, then contact for a week before another week of no contact before something else comes up. We spent the whole day together 3 days ago, but because of the meeting yesterday, it's now been a day and a half of nothing again. To answer your question of what I'd like, compassion and actual helpful advice was what I was searching for, not judgment and malice. Update 1. May 2nd, 2024. My life was great, my relationship was great until yesterday. It suddenly wasn't. The last month felt a bit off, but I didn't think it would lead to this. I still love him intensely. He still loves me intensely. He wants to stay with me. It's just that he says he can't do marriage because he can't untie the trauma he has from the idea of it from his childhood cult stuff. My mom says I'll be a pathetic loser if I still stay with him regardless, and that he'll never be a part of the family, but I want to stay with him regardless. But I don't know if I can live with a constant fear, anxiety, and insecurities that will come from being with someone who can just leave whenever he feels like it. My wedding is on Saturday, and my family still wants to have it since it's more of a small family gathering already anyways, since his family wasn't invited due to cult stuff. My life as I know it feels completely over. I don't know what to do. The person I turn to for empathy and compassion turned to me screaming that I'm an idiot. I'm only in the country for my wedding. I live abroad. My new job and my fiancé pressured me and reassured me I should already use my new married name professionally. I'm a teacher, and all my kids already know me as his name. Everything sucks, and I can't stop sobbing. Edit to clarify. He left me while we were about to sign the marriage certificate. It's a symbolic left at the altar since there was never going to be an actual altar anyway. I told my mom that the way she phrased her advice/opinion was cruel. She told me she's tired of my drama and doesn't need it in her old age. I already had told her she was right and I knew what she said was right, but just that the way she said it was cruel. She said she no longer cares about maintaining a relationship with me and that it isn't worth the drama at her age. I apologized because she's right. I'm a piece of who never saw that this situation hurt and humiliated her too. I wanted to just have this be a nice party with friends and just spend time together. I'm going to try my best to keep my negativity inside so it doesn't spoil the mood, and maybe there's a hope to salvage it as a good party. But I think once I return abroad that this will be the last time my mom will ever speak to me again. I don't know how I could repay her for all she spent on this wedding, but hopefully removing myself from her life will maybe make her life more peaceful and less stressful, even if it destroys me. As for him, thank you all so much for your kindness, advice, and perspectives. Truly makes me feel better to read the comments, even if they hurt, and I deserve it. We will be talking about it tomorrow in person, and I've scheduled an emergency therapy appointment for myself for tomorrow morning. I've never done therapy before, and I'm scared, but I know it's what I need. I'm so angry at him for ruining my entire life that I don't know if the love I have can salvage this. Now for some comments where Opie replied. Comment 1. You can't be with someone who cannot effectively communicate their fears and needs and instead chooses to run. He failed you. He does not get to treat you like that. You deserve better. Your mom may have let her anger for you make her word things poorly, but she is right. That dude does not get to have his cake and eat it too. Go back home, go no contact with him, finish out the teaching contract, is it? Then my recommendation is to find a teaching job in a dream location, maybe be a traveling teacher for a few years, heal, live big, and if you wish, find love again. Opie. I am a traveling teacher already. I'm home right now just for the week so that I could do my wedding. Back to where I live abroad next week to live a life of isolation and loneliness. Comment 2. Please elaborate on cult stuff that could literally be anything. Opie. He's seen marriage used as a way to entrap and oppress women due to the cult culture of his family. He doesn't understand that what he's done is created a tilted power dynamic where he's holding all the power and autonomy, and I'm the scared, anxiety-riddled one, terrified he'll leave at any moment in any possible future we may have now, which is honestly worse in my opinion. Comment 3. So many questions, but at the top of my head as these. Why did he agree to marry you? Why were you using a name that wasn't yours for so long that your students know you by that name? Haven't you talked beforehand with him? Was this relationship one-sided? Opie, he asked me to marry him. My job told me to start using his name because the school year started in April and I would be changing my name in May. I said no, it felt like I'd jinx it. I called him, and he said stop being such an overthinker and just use my name. I talked with him. He reassured me. It's been 3 weeks that my kids know me as that name, and to be honest, yes, it does feel one-sided, but not in the way you're implying. Update 2. May 8, 2024. For a brief recap, I was going to the officiant to sign my marriage license with my fiancé, who I'd been with for 4 years. He chickened out and said he couldn't marry me and ruptured my image of us. TLDR at bottom. On to the update. Since I was so brutally humiliated, it really made me think back on all the not great parts of us. He was always very gassy whenever I'd claim his actions reflected the opposite of his words. I respect you. I care for you, so I ended up talking to him. I asked him to define what his definition of loving someone, respecting someone, caring for someone, and trusting someone means. Needless to say, they were twisted and not healthy at all. I tried to make him see that, and he had a few moments of holy, I think you're right. I don't actually trust or respect you. Now, just because he admitted it didn't mean the crazy selfish actions didn't continue throughout the entirety of the conversation. It was so crazy how I'd never been able to articulate it in a way where he actually understood before. He actually had the gall to say, wow, we should have had this conversation a long time ago, because of how much he was realizing he was treating me like trash than gaslighting me about it. I was like, I've been trying to tell you this for years, but you never respected me enough to listen, and I was always too emotional to articulate it properly. Anyways, he wanted to do marriage counseling with the intent to marry at the end. I told him I'd rather break up because the power dynamic is too shifted, and I don't feel like it's salvageable. With how he was listening to me and finally acknowledging and understanding me and his own actions, I was hopeful for maybe a friendship one day in the distant future, but after a teary, bittersweet goodbye, he absolutely ruined it with yet another selfish action right at the last moment. I didn't want to be touched or do physical affection for multiple reasons. One of the main reasons being he uses it for comfort when he's feeling sorry for himself. I had just spent 3 hours explaining how he never thinks of me in any of his actions, and maybe it's cruel of me to keep that last kiss or whatever, but it felt selfish and manipulative to me. So after an actually heartfelt goodbye and promise to be better people in the future, we part ways, only for him to run back to me to try and do some romantic swoop in and kiss me. I recoiled really fast and honestly just stared at him incredulously, like he had just ignored everything I had just said. That was the moment I went from sadness and grief from losing something so important to me to just numb and angry about it. I haven't cried since. I don't even feel sad when I think about him because all I can think about is how angry the whole thing makes me feel. I'm 28 and feel like I wasted my good years on someone who had zero regard for me in any capacity. I developed so many new insecurities, confidence issues, and trauma from 4 years with him, and now I have to navigate the dating pool again with all of that in a foreign country no less. TLDR, I broke up with him and I'm just angry now. Top comments. Comment 1. How are you and your mom doing? Sounds like you left your home and family for him. Are you thinking of coming back home? Opie. Both my family and him are in America. I left for me, my dreams, and career. I'm actually thankful that I can go back abroad to be away from him, and honestly, I need some time away from my mom as well. Comment 2. Bravo. I'm so proud of you for finally ending it with him. It's likely he only understands you now as a form of gaslighting and trying to plate you. I know it hurts now, but with time you will heal and be stronger. Don't worry about dating right now. Worry about loving yourself and nurturing yourself. Give yourself all the love, support, and understanding you normally gave to him. You deserve it. I hope your therapy visits go well and help you build up your self-worth and detector. I'm so glad to hear you took the right steps towards a healthier, happier life. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My husband's best friend is getting married and I'm completely refusing to go. Am I wrong for this? I honestly don't even know where to start. I apologize if the timeline is difficult to follow. My 30F husband, 30M, is currently a nurse. 2 years ago my husband, let's call him Wayne, enrolled in a 1-year accelerated nursing program at a university in our city. This was a super intense program that basically shoved 4 years of nursing school into 1 year. The program is designed for people who already have an undergrad degree and have completed PR recs for the program. Wayne quit his job so he could focus all of his energy on the nursing program and pass the NLEX. I was fully supportive of this and basically told him whatever he needed to do to study and feel prepared. I was game. I think it is important to mention that Wayne and I have been together for 15 years now. We are high school sweethearts. During the first week of his program, Wayne met 2 other students and became friends with them. I will call them Bonnie, 27F, and Gail, 28F. The 3 of them became fast friends and quickly made a habit of studying together every single day for almost a year. They would take turns going to each other's houses for study sessions. The majority of the time the 3 would be at our house because it was somewhat in the middle between their houses and the university. Since I worked during the day, they could study all day if they wanted. I also really liked Bonnie and Gail. Eventually, we all became friends and Bonnie's boyfriend, Dan, 27M, and Gail's girlfriend, Tanis, 28F, would come over for dinners. Before anyone asks, I had absolutely no issue with Wayne befriending women or spending time with them. Wayne and I are best friends and have a very secure relationship. I trust him completely. Not to mention Bonnie and Gail were also in relationships, so it was no big deal. Eventually, Wayne and Bonnie even helped Gail work through some of her relationship drama and helped her break up with Tanis. The get-togethers became smaller after that because Tanis was gone and Dan was working more and couldn't come. Fast forward to graduation. Wayne and Bonnie decided that they wanted to work in the emergency department, and Gail was going to work in a less intense area. Both Wayne and Bonnie got a job with the same ER, and their shifts would be similar, so they would be coworkers. We all thought this was awesome because that particular ER is in a tough part of town and they see a lot of level 1 traumas. It's great that Wayne and Bonnie can debrief after shifts and vent to each other. Gail was forced to go on night shift, which was the opposite schedule of Wayne and Bonnie. Over the past year, Wayne and Gail haven't really spoken. Wayne rationalized that they both got really busy and just lost touch. Bonnie still spoke regularly with Gail. Around this time, Dan proposed to Bonnie. This was a long time coming, and we were all very happy for them. Bonnie said that Wayne and I were definitely invited and it was going to be so much fun. The happy couple eventually told us that the wedding would not be in town but take place in a state far away, easily 12 to 13 hours drive or a flight away. While that would be a lot of money for us, we said that we would do our best to come. Bonnie asked Gail to be a bridesmaid, and we were super pumped because it would be like a small reunion. At this time, I found out I was pregnant. We had been trying for a while and we were so happy. It would work out great because our baby boy would be approximately 9 months old at the time of the wedding, old enough that we could leave him for a day or two with my parents to go to the wedding. Fast forward to last week. On Tuesday, Bonnie hand-delivered Wayne our invitation to their wedding. I was able to request off work and we've been slowly saving money to travel for the wedding. On Friday, Bonnie pulled Wayne aside after their shift. Bonnie said that her and Dan had a really bad fight because Bonnie invited Wayne and I to the wedding. Wayne was very confused. Why would Dan be upset that we were invited? Bonnie then said, since Wayne, Bonnie, and Gail met in nursing school, Gail has been under the delusion that Wayne was in love with her. Apparently, Bonnie and Dan would talk with Gail almost every day and tell Gail that there was nothing between her and Wayne. Gail would insist that Wayne was in love with her. Bonnie would tell Gail that she was in the room when such and such happened and there was nothing that happened. As time went on, Gail started to badmouth me to Bonnie and Dan. She would say that I was manipulative and I was mean to Wayne, etc. Gail started saying that she needed to break up with Tanis because Wayne and her were going to be together eventually. Gail thought that Wayne was going to leave me to be with her. Bonnie and Dan continued to tell Gail that she was crazy and nothing was happening. When Wayne told them that we were trying for a baby, Gail started a whole other delusion that Wayne and her were going to have kids. According to Bonnie, during one of our dinners when it was just the 4 of us, I said something that Gail then passed on to Dan. This was around the time of a school shooting where an AR-15 was used. For context, I was a teacher in an urban school district for 5 years. During those 5 years I was in 5 lockdowns, one of which had an armed intruder. While I am not anti-gun, I feel very strongly about school safety and gun restrictions. Dan enjoys guns and owns an AR-15. He is also very passionate about gun safety. Gail told Dan that I said something to the effect of, anyone who owns an AR-15 has those children's blood on their hands. I can say with 100% certainty that I never said that. I am sure because that is a super unhinged thing to say and it would never come to my mind to say that. If anything, I would have said that AR-15s shouldn't be so readily available to citizens and there should be restrictions in place so these tragedies don't happen. Regardless, Gail told Dan that I allegedly said this. According to Bonnie, Gail talked to Dan without Bonnie present, and she was unaware that this conversation had taken place. Dan was very angry and hurt by what Gail said and chose to internalize his anger towards me. Apparently, Dan decided he no longer wanted to see Wayne and I and lied about his work schedule so as to not attend dinners with us. It was not until a couple months after this that Bonnie invited Dan to dinner at our house and he said, "Why would I spend time with those people after what they said?" Bonnie was confused, and then Dan told her what Gail told him. Bonnie told Dan that those words were never spoken and Gail was lying. By this point, Dan had convinced himself that I had said those things and didn't believe Gail would lie. When they graduated from nursing school and started working, they stopped hanging out as much because of their schedules. Gail took this as Wayne ghosting her and breaking up with her. Gail continued to badmouth me and Wayne. When Dan found out that Bonnie had given us a wedding invitation, he was livid. He felt that Bonnie went behind his back to invite us, even though we hurt him. When Wayne reiterated this to me, I was shocked. We had been completely in the dark about this whole thing for 2 years. Bonnie had been acting like nothing was wrong. After almost every shift, Wayne and Bonnie talk on the phone. Not once has she even mentioned anything about this. Gail is still in the wedding party despite this. Dan still hates us. Bonnie wants Wayne and I to be at her wedding and says she can't get married without her best friend, Wayne. There. Firstly, Bonnie has lied by omission for 2 years. Frankly, I don't trust Bonnie anymore. I am skeptical that we have all of the information and there isn't something more at play here. Secondly, I am offended that Dan would think that I said those things, and I'm shocked he would blindly believe Gail, especially after her delusions about Wayne. Thirdly, why would I want to go to a wedding where Gail is a bridesmaid? Who is to say she doesn't start something and cause a scene? Also, why would I want to spend thousands of dollars to travel to a wedding where I am uncomfortable and I'm leaving my baby? While Wayne is as confused as I am, he still wants to go to the wedding. He is trauma bonded with Bonnie through work and values her as a friend. While I understand this, I cannot get over this. Bonnie is trying to talk to Dan and convince him that we are good people and Gail twisted everything. Honestly, after being left in the dark for 2 years, I don't want to have to convince anyone that we are innocent in this. If anything, we should be getting an apology from all parties. Wayne and I are currently still waiting to hear from Bonnie about her talk with Dan and Gail. As of right now, May 21st, Gail is still a bridesmaid and Dan still doesn't want us at the wedding. Am I wrong for feeling this way? What would you do? Edit. The term trauma bond is what my husband and Bonnie use all the time. That is how they describe their relationship since working in the ER together. It is half said as a joke, half in truth. Wayne also expressed that he did not want to go to the wedding if Gail was there. The main reason being that we don't want to risk there being a scene and potentially ruining Bonnie's wedding. Bonnie has also mentioned that she is considering removing Gail from the wedding party, but she is afraid to do that because she doesn't want to trigger her or cause her to spiral or hurt herself. Gail has also been going through some mental health crisis over the past year, which contributes to Bonnie being hesitant to ask her to bow out. I am not defending Bonnie or Gail, but understand Bonnie's hesitation. Edit 2. I am not currently pregnant. I had my son in January, and he would be approximately 9 months old by the time the wedding took place. Update 1. Wayne and I sent Bonnie a message stating that if Gail was at the wedding we would not be attending. Bonnie said, I totally understand and I would never want you to be uncomfortable ever. I'm so sorry this is happening, and I hate that I had to tell you guys. I wish I could have kept it to myself so no one else got hurt. Gail and I are up in the air right now. I don't have a single thought on our friendship. Dan is getting better slightly. He's not as angry, or I should say his anger has shifted to Gail, but he's still frustrated. Now we know that she would have never told us. I haven't talked to Wayne yet to see how he feels about this. Update 2. Thank you all for the thoughtful and blunt responses. I tend to be a very straightforward person, so it is nice to know that random unbiased third parties on the internet also think this situation is ridiculous and childish. I am aware that this whole thing is very high school. I couldn't agree more. I think that is what makes it all the more baffling. I know many of you wanted an update, so here you go. Since I left off, Wayne and I spoke and thought it was only fair that we reach out to Gail. As many of you pointed out, we have only gotten Bonnie's side of the story. Gail admitted to having a crush on Wayne but denied everything else. As previously established, Gail is untrustworthy, so I take her response with a large grain of salt. Wayne and I screenshotted the texts and sent them to Bonnie. We made it very clear that we are not keeping anything secret, and we assumed that Gail would immediately reach out to Bonnie to let her know we reached out. Bonnie was upset that we talked to Gail and didn't know what we hoped to gain from that. Bonnie went on to say that her life is exploding, and US wanting more information is valid, but it's not helping her. Duh. What made me laugh is that she said she wished she would have had a say and how the interaction was navigated. Like, yeah, same girl, I wish we would have had the option to choose how to respond too, but I digress. Bonnie decided to call Wayne. I was at work, so I couldn't be privy to the conversation. By Wayne answering the call, I am aware that it opens him up to manipulation, which I did point out to him after the fact. Long story aids, already way too long. Bonnie said that her and Dan are having issues separate from this whole ordeal, so this situation is adding fuel to the fire. I know. Noah's reaching out to Gail stirred up additional for Bonnie. Do X2. Wayne told Bonnie that he knows that she has a lot going on, but that doesn't negate what she did to us. essentially telling her that this is a result of her own actions. Bonnie asked Wayne, "Do you want to step back from our friendship?" Wayne said no. "I can feel your disgust, just keep reading." When Wayne is relaying this to me, I am trying to remain composed and let him finish. This is basically the cliff notes of what I told him. Bonnie knowingly lied to us the entire time we have known her. If she could lie for this long, what else has she lied about? She knew that Gail was unstable yet thought it was okay for us to continue to be friends and invite her into our home. Bonnie and Gail have no respect for me. This is clear because Gail badmouthed me the entire time and wanted to end our marriage, and Bonnie thought it was okay to let Gail continue with these delusions unchecked and continue to be around us. Not to mention that, as a medical professional and a friend, she should have encouraged her to seek help. Bonnie knew that Gail had lied to Dan, yet didn't correct it or bring it to our attention. She was cool with Dan thinking I'm awful and believing a lie. Bonnie continued to treat Gail as a friend and made her a bridesmaid, further solidifying her indifference to me and my marriage to Wayne. Bonnie wanted to invite us to her wedding against the groom's wishes, knowing full well that Gail would be there, and this could pose potential problems. Why should we go to their wedding? A wedding is celebrating the sanctity of marriage, which Bonnie and Dan clearly don't give a about. Why should we drop money on going to their wedding to celebrate their marriage when they clearly don't give a about ours? How could you possibly still consider Bonnie a friend knowing all of this information? I gave Wayne time to process all of this information. Honestly, I didn't want a response right then and there because I want him to have confidence in his decision, knowing all the possible ramifications. Wayne ended up saying that he doesn't consider Bonnie a friend and hesitated before because he is so sad and disappointed in Bonnie. I think he had trusted her so much, and since all of this goes against her perceived character, it is a lot to process for a logical person. This whole thing is so immature and childish that you want to rationalize everything into something more complicated in hopes that all the dots will connect because this is so illogical. Wayne had a tough time seeing this clearly. I told Wayne that we should tell Bonnie that things are not okay with us, but she needs to sort her out and decide where her priorities lie. Wayne was hesitant at first to do this because he didn't want to trigger Bonnie and make her feel worse. I pointed out that Bonnie used that same train of thought for Gail, and look where she is. While we are not telling Bonnie that we are cutting her off, we are simply pausing our arguments so she can figure out her relationships. We are willing to talk to her at a later date about considering keeping her as a friend, but keeping her at arm's length until she can prove she is trustworthy. However, this is all dependent on the decision she makes about Dan and Gail. We are waiting a couple days before telling Bonnie that this is our plan because we wanted to make sure our emotions were in check to be as civil as possible. I am sure you are wondering, what about Dan? In short, me, if he is so fragile about guns and cares so little than to just ask about something so trivial, whatever. In the best possible outcome, we would still have little to no contact with Dan. As RuPaul says, what other people say about me is none of my business, and not just because it doesn't come to my attention until 2 years later. Bazinga! Wayne and I are in a good place. We talked about how he can't please everyone and his family should come first. While we don't want to be callous or dismissive of our friends, how events impact our family is the first priority. This is where things currently are. If you want another update, let me know. Once again, thank you for your responses. It was incredibly validating for me. Edit. After processing, he was able to come to the conclusion that Bonnie is not a friend. I won't lie and say his initial response wasn't deeply hurtful. I told him this but reiterated that he needed to sit with this information and decide how he wanted to move forward. As someone who has lost touch with friends that have the emotional maturity of a potato, it can be extremely sad when you accept their absence from your life. I doubt many people will understand this reference, LOL. But there is a scene in a Bob's Burgers episode where Linda forces Louise to have a slumber party. Hilarity ensues, and Tina and Jean end up being human shields during a pillow fight. Tina says, "Is this your first time being used as a human shield?" Jean said, "Yeah." Tina responds, "This is my third time, doing great." In terms of dealing with petty dramatic people, this isn't my first rodeo, unfortunately. Wayne sees life through rose-colored glasses and always sees the absolute best in people. Does this make him naive at times? Sure. Does this make him a wonderful friend and partner? Absolutely. Is it incredibly frustrating when he needs to overanalyze situations and then eventually come to the same conclusion that you A cynic came to hours earlier? Yep. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Accidentally X said my wife for cheating on me because of her secret intimacy pills kept disappearing, but then I found out it was just my daughter. Me, 52M, and my wife, 50F, have been married for 25 years and are immensely happy. We of course have the normal fights, me not cleaning the bathroom, argue about me losing money on sports betting, her spending twice as much at the shops as we agreed to, etc. But overall have a really happy marriage until about 8 p.m. yesterday night. Recently, we've been having a bit of trouble in the bedroom. I don't want to derail the post, but basically sex has naturally slowed down between the two of us in the last couple years. This has really bothered my wife and bothered me a bit also. I will admit, once we vocalized the problem, we both agreed we're going to take steps to fix some things. We talked to some doctors, basically all of them wanted to put my wife on some serious medications, which my wife was pretty against. This led to about a year of building what we call our sex drawer, filled of products in the kitchen that my wife has tried and tested and likes the ingredients of. It's nothing crazy, literally things like vitamin D, zinc, some Lul soft gels, maca stuff that has been tried and tested. Nothing too wild and all OTC. Now here's where things start to go downhill. So, my wife naturally takes these products around the times we're going to be getting intimate or try. Now, I don't like monitor the kitchen drawer, but sometimes I do peek. I know, but I can't help it. About 3-ish weeks ago, I noticed a ton of pills and soft gels were disappearing. Me, thinking I'm about to having a pretty good week, I start to get mentally prepared for it. So about a week after that, I rechecked the drawer and a ton more of the stuff has been taken. I remember thinking, that's weird, we haven't done anything recently. About a week later, the same thing happened, tons of pills and soft gels are gone, and I'm not gonna lie, I get in my head a bit. Last night me and my wife are out to dinner. After a couple glasses of wine, I asked my wife why she's been taking so much of the stuff in the sex drawer without trying for any intimacy. I asked, coming from an angle of both worry, mostly for health, and confusion. Immediately my wife gets insanely defensive, blows off the conversation, and tells me she isn't talking about it. This, of course, makes it where now it's the only thing I want to talk about, and while I respect everyone's I don't want to talk about this, I think something like this should probably be discussed. I press a bit, and for about an hour she's not having this convo. Basically, it gets to the point where I just blatantly ask my wife if she's seeing other people. My wife, who has never been aggressive or loud, starts basically screaming at me in this Italian restaurant. She tells me my daughter, 25F, has been having some relationship issues with her boyfriend and has been taking some of the stuff to help. I'm like, why didn't you just tell me? She goes on a rant about how some things are girl to girl and how my daughter didn't want her telling anyone, which I get, but come on, I buy the things to fill the drawer. My wife ends up leaving the restaurant mid-dinner. I've honestly never seen my wife this mad. I'm honestly a bit worried for our marriage, and to top it off, my daughter is acting awkward around me. I get that I stepped out of line with the questioning, but the defensiveness really caught me off guard and would have assumed my daughter using our stuff would have been discussed, and I wouldn't have actually cared and would have bought more stuff. Anytime I try to talk to my wife, she makes it seem like I'm an insane, out-of-control monster, that I've broken the trust in our marriage and that I've ruined 25 years of progress we've made together. Reddit, am I crazy? I'm beyond confused right now. Edit. 4 hours since I posted. Wow, a lot of incredible information in here. Thank you to everyone for your comments. This post has made me feel better and has allowed me to think about other aspects of our marriage. I've seen a ton of requests for info, so let me try to answer some of the questions here. Me and my wife didn't go to the doctor for only libido issues. I don't know the general age of Reddit, but as you get older, things like menopause and other hormonal issues became a reality, just the way of life. I didn't plan on questioning my wife at the dinner. It had been in the back of my head, and after a few glasses of wine I handled the situation poorly, which I 100% agree with all of you. Not the right time or place, though we've had tough conversations before in public. Still doesn't justify it. Calling it a sex drawer may have been a bad name, but it's just how we reference it. We didn't really think too deeply when coming up with a name, and I don't know actually which one of us created it. I don't have a good reason why it's in the kitchen, but we're kind of past the age of caring about what someone may or may not see in our home. I wasn't monitoring the sex drawer. The Lucille soft gels, which we keep out of the box, come only in a 30-pill supply. Half the pack or so missing, I didn't count, is very obvious even at a quick glance. And for why I didn't automatically assume my daughter, the soft gels mentioned above and some of the other stuff in there are for a specific thing outside of the vitamins. While I don't know the ingredients too intimately, you wouldn't really expect those things to be shared. And finally, for those mentioning that my wife is still actually hiding something, I appreciate your comments, and it has given me a ton to think about. While I won't jump to those type of conclusions, I do agree that there is probably more that needs to be discussed between me, my wife, and my daughter. Comment where Opie has replied. Comment 1, NTA. I am a little suspicious. Missing stuff requires explanation. I'm also a little curious why you keep sex stuff in a kitchen drawer where just anybody trying to help in your kitchen would have access to them. That's the kind of stuff you keep in a medicine cabinet. Opie. It's basically a drawer of vitamins. Even if guests found it, I doubt they'd actually know what it was. I think that's just where we ended up stuffing things as time went on. I'd give either of us really wanted it there more than where we just ended up putting things. Comment 2. Is there parts of this story missing? Feels like there's something missing. Why did you choose to bring this up at a restaurant? Was it to try to avoid the yelling? Did you plan on it being a fight from the start? Get your wife's side of the story and post it. We crave the drama. Update. April 23, 2024. Hey again, Reddit. As for the update, I wish I had better news. After reading through the post and all the DMs everyone sent, thank you all for those. I was a bit overwhelmed and a bit confused, so I decided to just relax and really not try to jump to any conclusions through the weekend. Many of the points that were brought up did broaden my perspective, and some of the ones assuming infidelity, I won't lie, did get to me a bit, and I was running pretty high anxiety-wise. Realize at this point me, my wife, and my daughter still aren't talking. Our home has suddenly become one of the most lonely, isolating, and awkward places in the world. Sunday night, while watching some basketball, I basically just thought to myself, I can't go on like this. So I went and talked to my daughter. I approached the conversation and, you can talk to me about anything, and if you and your boyfriend were having sexual issues, I would be glad to buy you guys more stuff. My daughter just starts to seemingly break down to an almost uncontrollable sob. I'll be honest, I thought at this point she was going to inform me on some serious medical issues or something. Once she calmed down, she basically says that she's taken some of the vitamin D and zinc before but has never taken any of the Lul or Black Cash. I look at her with that, do you realize what that may mean kind of look, and we just hugged and cried together. I've spoken to some of my friends who have gone through similar things and have gotten advice from lawyering up and divorcing my wife right away to marriage counseling and fighting for the 25 years we've been together. At the moment, I'm not going to do anything. Need a bit more time to think. Need to talk to my wife and really find out what's going on. This is probably the last update from me, as when I first came to Reddit this was just a silly fight between me and my wife, now progressed to a place that it's feeling a bit too private for me to share, and the above update was a bit tougher to write. Thank you again for all your comments and perspective. You all have helped me see something that I was blind or refusing to see. John. Top comments. Comment 1. Those 2 supplements aren't sex supplements, they are for menopause. Your wife may just be embarrassed that she has started menopause. She may be fearful that you will no longer find her desirable because she has started menopause. Step back a bit before you jump off that high board. Comment 2. There is the possibility that your wife needs the supplements for her own general comfort. I'm not at menopausal age, however, do have medical conditions that can cause vaginal dryness, and it can range from uncomfortable to actually painful. It's personal and can be a very touchy subject, not to mention the mood swings that come with menopause. Not saying cheating is completely out of the question, just saying there are other possibilities. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My husband brought home his long-lost cousin, but I discovered she was actually his ex-fiancée. Now they're together and I'm starting over at 31. I, 31F, have been married to Brian, 33M, for 3 years now. We met at a charity event for a local animal shelter where we both volunteered. I was immediately drawn to his kind eyes and infectious laugh. Brian worked in finance and I was a marketing executive. Despite our busy schedules, we made time for each other and our relationship blossomed quickly. Brian came from a well-to-do family. His father was a prominent lawyer and his mother was a retired school principal. They seemed nice enough when I met them, but I always felt a certain coldness from them, especially Brian's mother. Brian would brush it off, saying they were just reserved people. My own family background was quite different. I grew up in a tight-knit middle-class family with two older brothers. My parents, both teachers, instilled in us the values of honesty and hard work. They welcomed Brian with open arms when we started dating. Our wedding was a lavish affair, mostly planned by Brian's parents. I would have preferred something smaller and more intimate, but I went along with it to keep the peace. Looking back, maybe that was the first red flag, my tendency to compromise to avoid conflict. The first 2 years of our marriage were mostly happy. We bought a beautiful house in the suburbs and talked about starting a family soon. Brian's career was taking off and he was working longer hours, but he always made time for date nights and weekend getaways. Everything changed last week when Brian came home with a woman I'd never seen before. He introduced her as Megan, 28F, his long-lost cousin. According to Brian, Megan had been estranged from the family for years after a falling out with her parents. He said she needed a place to stay for a while and asked if she could live with us temporarily. I was taken aback. In all our years together, Brian had never mentioned having a cousin. When I asked about it, he said it was a painful family topic that he didn't like discussing. He seemed upset that I was questioning him, so I dropped it for the moment. Megan was pretty in a girl-next-door kind of way. She had long brown hair, green eyes, and a smattering of freckles across her nose. She seemed nice enough, if a bit reserved. I tried to be welcoming, showing her to the guest room and giving her a tour of the house. Over the next few days, I started noticing things that made me uneasy. Brian and Megan seemed very close and comfortable with each other for long-lost relatives. They'd often sit close together on the couch, whispering and laughing. A few times, I walked in on them having hushed conversations that abruptly stopped when they saw me. One night, I came home late from work and found them drinking wine together in the kitchen. Megan was sitting on the counter while Brian stood very close to her, their heads bent together. They jumped apart when I walked in, looking guilty. I started paying more attention after that. Brian was spending a lot of time with Megan, even taking days off work to show her around the city. Meanwhile, he was becoming more distant with me. He was often irritable and snapped at me over little things. When I tried to talk to Brian about my concerns, he got defensive and accused me of being paranoid and unwelcoming to his family. He said I should be more understanding of Megan's difficult situation. I felt like I was going crazy. Was I just being overly suspicious? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so I decided to do some digging. I reached out to Brian's parents, saying I wanted to send a gift to welcome Megan back to the family. To my shock, they had no idea who I was talking about. They told me Brian was an only child and didn't have any cousins. I was reeling from this revelation. Why would Brian lie about Megan being his cousin? Who was she really? I didn't confront Brian right away because I wanted to gather more information first. I started going through our home office while Brian was at work, looking for any clues. In a locked drawer of Brian's desk, I found some photos of him with Megan that looked like they were taken years ago. They were clearly a couple in the photos, kissing and embracing. I also found some old letters and cards from Megan to Brian. Reading them made it clear they had been in a serious relationship in the past. Megan wrote about how much she loved Brian and couldn't wait to be with him forever. As I sat there, surrounded by evidence of Brian's lies, memories from our relationship started to take on new meaning. I remembered a trip we took to Chicago early in our relationship. Brian had been acting strange the whole time, constantly checking his phone and disappearing for long periods. He claimed it was work stress, but now I wondered if he had been meeting Megan. There was also the time I found a woman's earring in Brian's car. He said it must have belonged to a coworker he had given a ride to, but he got unusually defensive when I asked about it. Had it been Megan's all along? My head was spinning. I couldn't believe Brian had lied to me like this. I sat there for hours, reading through everything and trying to make sense of it all. When Brian got home that night, I confronted him with what I'd found. At first, he tried to deny it, but when I showed him the photos and letters, he broke down and admitted the truth. Megan was his ex-girlfriend from college. They had dated for 3 years and were even engaged at one point, but Brian's parents disapproved of Megan, thinking she wasn't from a good enough family. They pressured him to break things off, threatening to cut him off financially if he didn't. Brian gave in and ended the relationship, which devastated Megan. Recently, Megan had reached out to Brian again. She told him her marriage had ended in divorce and she was struggling. Brian said he felt guilty about how things ended and wanted to help her. He claimed he only intended to give her temporary support until she got back on her feet. I asked Brian why he lied about who Megan was. He said he was afraid I wouldn't understand if I knew the truth. He swore nothing inappropriate had happened between them and that he loved me, but I didn't know what to believe anymore. As Brian talked, I thought back to all the times in our relationship when things hadn't quite added up. The unexplained absences, the secretive phone calls, the times he got overly defensive about innocent questions. Had he been in touch with Megan all along? I thought about my own family, how disappointed they would be to learn about Brian's deception. My brothers had always been protective of me, and I knew they would be furious. My parents, who valued honesty above all else, would be heartbroken. I told Brian that Megan needed to leave our home immediately. He initially protested, but gave in when he saw how serious I was. Megan left that night to stay with a friend. Now I'm left trying to process everything. I feel betrayed and like my whole marriage has been built on lies. The future I thought we were building together, the plans for children, the house we bought, the life we were creating, it all feels tainted now. Brian is begging for forgiveness, promising to cut all ties with Megan and go to couples counseling, but I don't know if I can ever trust him again. Every time I look at him, I see the photos of him with Megan, the love letters she wrote him. I haven't told anyone what's happening yet. I'm embarrassed and ashamed, feeling like I should have seen this coming. I keep replaying every moment of our relationship in my head, wondering what else I might have missed. I'm not sure what to do next. Should I try to work things out with Brian? Or is this betrayal too big to move past? I love him, or at least I thought I did. But how can I stay with someone who lied so easily and for so long? I'm scared of starting over at 31. We've built a life together and the thought of dismantling it is overwhelming. But the thought of staying and always wondering, always doubting, is equally daunting. I could use some advice. Has anyone been in a similar situation? How did you move forward? I feel lost and alone, and I'm not sure where to turn next. Update 1. It's been about 2 weeks since my last post and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their advice and support. It really helped me gain some clarity during this confusing time. After Megan left, Brian continued to beg for forgiveness. He swore up and down that nothing physical had happened between them and that he loved only me, but I just couldn't shake my doubts and mistrust. Every time he touched me, I couldn't help but wonder if he had touched Megan the same way. Every time he said, "I love you," I questioned if he had said the same words to her. I decided to reach out to Megan directly. I got her number from Brian's phone and asked to meet up. To my surprise, she agreed. We met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. Megan seemed nervous but willing to talk. Her story matched Brian's in some ways, but there were key differences. She confirmed they had dated in college and been engaged, but according to Megan, Brian had reached out to her recently, not the other way around. Megan said Brian had been unhappy in our marriage and was considering leaving me. He had contacted her, saying he still had feelings for her and wanted to reconnect. She admitted they had kissed a few times while living in our house, but claimed it hadn't gone further than that. As Megan talked, I remembered a conversation Brian and I had about 6 months ago. We had been discussing having children and Brian had seemed hesitant at the time. I thought he was just nervous about the big step. Now I wondered if he had already been thinking about leaving me. I was stunned by Megan's revelations. This was so different from what Brian had told me. When I confronted him with Megan's version of events, he initially tried to deny it. But when I pressed him, he finally broke down and admitted it was true. Brian confessed that he had been having doubts about our marriage for a while. He said he felt we had grown apart and he wasn't sure if he still loved me. When he ran into Megan by chance a few months ago, old feelings resurfaced. They started talking and texting regularly. Eventually, Brian invited Megan to stay with us under false pretenses. He claimed he wanted to see if there was still a spark between them before making any decisions about our marriage. He swore they hadn't slept together, but admitted there had been kissing and heavy flirting. As Brian confessed, I thought back to all the little changes in his behavior over the past few months. The way he had stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings, how he had been spending more time at the gym, saying he wanted to get in shape, the new cologne he had started wearing. All these little things that I had dismissed at the time now took on new, painful significance. I was devastated. Not only had Brian lied to me repeatedly, but he had been actively pursuing a relationship with another woman while still married to me. I felt like such a fool for not seeing what was happening right under my nose. I thought about my parents and how they would react to this news. They had always been so proud of me, of the life I had built with Brian. How could I tell them that it had all been a lie? And my brothers? They had welcomed Brian into the family like another brother. I knew they would be furious when they found out how he had betrayed me. After a lot of soul-searching and many sleepless nights, I've decided I can't continue this marriage. The trust is completely broken, and I don't think I'll ever be able to look at Brian the same way again. Every happy memory we shared is now tainted by the knowledge of his deception. I told Brian I want a divorce. He broke down crying when I told him my decision. He begged for another chance and said he'd do anything to make it right. He promised to cut all ties with Megan, to go to counseling, to be completely transparent with me about everything. But I know in my heart that too much damage has been done. Even if Brian never spoke to Megan again, how could I ever trust that there wouldn't be another woman in the future? How could I build a family with someone who could lie so easily and for so long? I've moved out of our house and I'm staying with my sister for now. Being around her two young children has been both a comfort and a painful reminder of the future I thought I would have with Brian. My sister has been incredibly supportive, letting me cry on her shoulder and assuring me that I'm making the right decision. I've contacted a divorce lawyer, and I'm starting the process. It's painful and scary, but I know it's the right thing for me. I'm dreading telling my parents, but I know they'll support me no matter what. As for Brian and Megan, I'm not sure what will happen with them. Part of me hopes they end up miserable together, but mostly I just want to move on and heal. I'm trying to focus on myself and building a new life. I've started seeing a therapist to help me process everything. It's been helpful to have a neutral party to talk to, someone who can help me work through my feelings of betrayal and loss. I'm also throwing myself into my work. I've taken on some new projects at the office, which has been a welcome distraction. My boss has been understanding about the situation and has given me some flexibility with my hours as I deal with the divorce proceedings. There are still moments when I miss Brian terribly. I miss the life we had together, the future we had planned, but then I remember the lies, the deception, and I know I'm making the right choice. Thank you again to everyone who offered support and advice. It really helped me find the strength to stand up for myself and make this difficult decision. I know I have a long road ahead, but I'm hopeful for the future. I'll update again once the divorce is finalized. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and things have continued to be challenging, but I'm slowly healing. The divorce proceedings are underway. Brian initially tried to contest it, claiming he had made a mistake and wanted to work things out. He sent me long emails detailing all the good times we had shared, reminiscing about our first date, our wedding day, the trips we had taken together. Reading these messages was like twisting a knife in my heart. I almost wavered in my decision a few times, but I held firm. Eventually, Brian agreed to an uncontested divorce, which should make the process smoother. I think he finally realized that there was no going back after what he had done. One unexpected development was that Brian's parents reached out to me. They had heard about what happened from Brian and wanted to offer their support. To my surprise, they were furious with Brian for his behavior. Brian's mom, Linda, invited me to lunch. She shared some family history I hadn't known before. Apparently, Brian had a pattern of this behavior. In college, he had cheated on Megan with another girl, which was the real reason for their initial breakup. His parents had covered for him at the time, thinking it was just a youthful mistake. Linda apologized profusely for not warning me about Brian's past. She said they had hoped he had changed and grown up. She offered to testify on my behalf if needed in the divorce proceedings. While I appreciated Linda's support, It also made me angry that this information had been hidden from me. If I had known about Brian's history of infidelity, I might have been more cautious or seen the red flags sooner. I couldn't help but feel that Linda and her husband were partly responsible for enabling Brian's behavior over the years. In terms of the practical aspects of separating our lives, it's been stressful but manageable. We're selling our house and dividing up our assets. Thankfully, we don't have children, which makes things less complicated, but it's still painful to dismantle the life we built together. Each item we divide feels like another little death of our relationship. I'm still staying with my sister for now, but I'm looking for my own place. It's daunting to think about starting over on my own, but also exciting in a way. I'm rediscovering parts of myself that got lost in my marriage. I've started painting again, a hobby I had given up when things got busy with work and married life. As for Brian and Megan, I've heard through mutual friends that they are together now. Apparently, they made their relationship official just weeks after I moved out. It stung to hear that, but it also reaffirmed that I made the right choice in leaving. Clearly, Brian's feelings for Megan were more than just a fleeting temptation. I'm focusing on healing and rebuilding my life. I've reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from during my marriage. It's been nice to remember who I was before I became Brian's wife. I'm throwing myself into my work and considering a career change I had always dreamed about but never pursued. Brian had always discouraged it, saying it was too risky, but now I'm free to make my own choices. I finally told my parents about the divorce. They were shocked and saddened, but incredibly supportive. My mom came to stay with me for a week, helping me sort through my things and just being there for me. My dad, usually a man of few words, told me how proud he was of me for standing up for myself. Their support has meant the world to me. Some days are still really hard. I have moments of doubt and loneliness. There are times when I miss the comfort and familiarity of my life with Brian. But overall, I know I'm on the right path. I'm proud of myself for being strong enough to walk away from a bad situation instead of settling. My therapist has been helping me work through my feelings of betrayal and self-doubt. We've been exploring why I stayed silent about my suspicions for so long and how I can trust my instincts more in the future. It's painful work, but I know it's necessary if I want to have healthy relationships moving forward. I've also joined a support group for people going through divorce. It's been helpful to talk to others who understand what I'm going through. Hearing their stories has made me feel less alone in this journey. Work continues to be a good distraction. I've thrown myself into a big project that's been challenging but rewarding. My boss has hinted at a possible promotion in the near future, which is exciting. Thank you again to this community for all the support. It's been a source of strength during this difficult time. I'll post another update once the divorce is finalized. Update 3. It's been about 3 months since my last update. The divorce was finalized last week, and I'm feeling a mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, and hope for the future. The process ended up being relatively smooth, thanks in large part to the support of Brian's parents. True to her word, Linda provided a statement about Brian's history of infidelity, which helped my case. In the end, we reached a fair settlement without having to go to court. I've moved into my own apartment now. It's small but cozy, and it feels good to have a space that's all mine. I've been enjoying decorating it and making it feel like home. I've hung up some of my paintings, which feels like a symbol of reclaiming my identity. As for Brian and Megan, I've heard through the grapevine that things aren't going well for them. Apparently, the excitement of their affair has worn off, and they're struggling with trust issues. Brian's cousin told me that he saw them having a heated argument in public recently. Part of me feels a bit of schadenfreude, but mostly I'm just glad it's not my problem anymore. I've started dating again very casually. It's been both exciting and terrifying. My first date was a disaster. I was so nervous I could barely string 2 words together, but it's gotten easier with practice. I'm taking things slow and being careful with my heart, but it's nice to be reminded that there are good people out there. Work has been a great distraction and source of fulfillment. I got that promotion I mentioned in my last update, which has been a nice boost to my confidence. I'm also taking some classes toward that career change I talked about before. It feels good to be working toward a goal that's just for me. My relationship with my family has grown even stronger through this ordeal. My brothers have been incredibly protective, sometimes to a fault. I've had to remind them a few times that I can fight my own battles now. My parents have been a constant source of support, always there with a listening ear or a home-cooked meal when I need it. I still have moments of sadness and anger about what happened. The other day, I found an old photo of Brian and me from our honeymoon, and it brought back a flood of emotions. But those moments are becoming less frequent and less intense. I'm starting to look back on my marriage as a learning experience rather than just a source of pain. I'm proud of how far I've come and excited about what the future holds. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm living life on my own terms. It's scary sometimes, but also incredibly freeing. Thank you all for being part of this journey with me. Your support and advice have been invaluable. While I hope to never need this kind of support again, I'm grateful it was here when I did. Here's to new beginnings and the adventures that lie ahead. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My sister hooked up with my BF and played the cancer card. Am I the jerk for not having a relationship with her anymore? My 25F father married my stepsister's 23F mother when I was 4 and she was 3. We've lived together most of our lives and are a family. She and I were extremely close. She developed cancer when she was 14 and was sick for about 2 years. She's since made a full recovery. During that time, my parents became understandably overprotective. They also asked a lot of me. I quit my extracurriculars so I could get a job. The money went towards her medical bill, and so I could drive her to appointments. I didn't go to dances, and any fun activities I did needed to include her. I did almost all of this willingly, the exception being having to quit my high school volleyball team. I did throw a bit of a tantrum about that but was swiftly punished, and I think having one emotional breakdown was pretty chill given the circumstances. Anyhow, I go to college and meet my ex, we'll call him Ben, when I'm a junior. We fall in love, blah blah blah. He and I move in together when we graduate, so we've been living together for about 3 years. We were serious until July when I walked into my bedroom and saw him effing my sister. I broke it off, tears were shed, he moved out, etc. My sister apologized at first but then backed off. I thought she was giving me space, but last week she called and asked if we could meet up. She told me that she and Ben were in love and were just telling me as a courtesy before they started posting photos online. Distraught, I left her in the restaurant by herself and did not pay my portion of the bill. She later Venmo'd me asking for the money. She told my parents, who then called me to their house, telling me how disappointed in me they are for not supporting my sister's relationship with Ben. They brought up the fact that because she had cancer as a teenager, she never learned proper social etiquette and has a hard time meeting people. I don't buy this, in part because I've seen her socialize just fine, and since we spent a good chunk of the time she was sick together, that would also mean that I should have bad social skills as well by that logic. They then told me that if I don't accept my sister and Ben's relationship, they may have to go no contact with me. I reminded them that I'm also their daughter and they should understand my point of view, but they are adamant that this is about me being jealous of her. For the record, I'm not jealous of her. I'm not upset that Ben picked her over me. I'm sad about the end of the relationship and do feel betrayed, but Lord knows that I don't want to be with a cheater. What I'm upset about is the fact that my sister chose Ben over me, that she slept with Ben knowing he and I were in a long-term committed relationship, and continues to be with him knowing how much it hurts me. Now, no one in my immediate family is talking to me, and I'm getting messages from aunts and uncles and cousins telling me that I'm an a-hole and selfish. Edit. Thank you everyone so much for your comments. This has gotten more attention than I expected and I'm having trouble keeping up. So if I don't say thank you, then thank you. I've been given a lot of food for thought. TBH, while I've had moments where I've been resentful or upset about my teenage years, I've always thought that I did the right thing for my sister and for my family, and that time wasn't all miserable. I was very close to my sister, and we made things as fun as we could. But I didn't think of it as an abdication of my parents' responsibilities, or that they were doing wrong by me, which many of you pointed out. I definitely have a lot to think about. Thank you again for making me feel less crazy about all of this. Update 1. Sometimes you can only laugh. Just got off of the phone with my cousin who saw this post and said he could explain a few things. I asked him why he was on Reddit instead of school. He asked me why I was on Reddit instead of work, and I said, touché. He told me that after my conversation with my mom, She went to his house and talked to my aunt, and here's the deal. Turns out my sister is not only in a relationship with Ben, but 4 months pregnant, which means she and Ben were effing for longer than I had even guessed. Apparently, my parents are so adamant that I forgive her because I'm already ruining their experience of their first grandchild. That's right, I'm less important than my stepmom posting ultrasounds to Facebook. This is where we're at. Anyhow, I called out of work sick the rest of the day, and I'm gonna drink a lot of alcohol, and then start thinking about what the hell I'm gonna do. Update 2. Am I the jerk for not accepting my sister's relationship with my ex despite her having cancer as a teenager? October 6, 2021, I was asked for an update, and thus here I am. Few things to clarify before I update. I didn't have a shitty childhood. The favoritism started when my sister was diagnosed. I moved out soon after and have been pretty independent since then. Not saying that how my parents treated me during those years were okay. But I wasn't Cinderella. I did not drink myself into oblivion. I had 2 white wine spritzers, but I appreciate the concern from folks. Anyhow, the update. I got in touch with my sister and asked her to meet up again at a park. No bill involved. I asked her if she was pregnant, and she told me the truth. She said she wanted us to still be in each other's lives and that she wanted me to be in her babies. A Redditor, and I forget who, I'm sorry, mentioned that she may ask me to be the godmother, and that person was correct. But, as many of you pointed out, if I didn't cut her off, I'd just become her bank and daycare employee. So I told her I could no longer be in her life, and I left her crying on a park bench and felt like the shittiest person in the world. I emailed my parents and told them how betrayed I felt and that I'd be cutting off contact with them. To my stepmom's credit, she apologized. She explained that she never thought my sister would live to have kids and that she let her emotion over that get the better of her. Understandable. My dad said nothing, which is honestly what sucked the worst about all of this. Ben tried messaging me from a burner account for the first time since the breakup, but I blocked him without reading it. I didn't go nuclear and post the story to Facebook as some suggested, but I sent an email to the extended family members who I care about. I explained the situation and how I'd be distancing myself from my family. Some have made it in US versus them situation, and as much as I appreciate the support, feeling like I'm in some valiant battle just makes me more tired, so I haven't been talking to much of anyone in my family. I feel lonely and crappy, but I think I made the right decision. Anyhow, not the most exciting update in the world, but hopefully everyone knows that I'm not dead. I do really appreciate the support I've gotten who made me smile during a really time. And hey, if anyone in the greater Boston area wants an extra guest at Thanksgiving, let me know. People wanted an update. November 24th, 2021. Hi, some people were interested in an update, so I am spending Thanksgiving with a friend and her family, so I won't be alone. Thanks to everyone who offered to host me, it was so sweet. I'm still not in touch with my family, but I know that Ben and my sister are having problems. I know this because he showed up at my place and cried for 3 hours. I'm gonna go to New Mexico in April. Planning is underway. Happy Thanksgiving to those who celebrate. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My husband has been talking like a baby for a year, and it is ruining our relationship. We all go through phases and pick up annoying habits, and sometimes we just need our loved ones to gently tell us if we've picked up a particularly egregious habit. Sometime in the last year, my husband has picked up a habit where he talks like a baby. At first, it was funny but passed into embarrassing, cringe-worthy behavior quickly. Examples: doggo, parer, woofer, SL subwoofer, pibble, hoodie boy, poo, BB, meow meow, Sammy Samish, Sammy Whammy, chicky nuggies, chicky tendies, adding a toddler Aries lisp to words, and the ones that really get gross are childish euphemisms for genitalia or sex. I cannot emphasize this enough. It is not endearing or sexy to have my husband talk about my boobies and his weir and weenie and wee who is and bingos. Nostalgia for scrubs be damned. We have not had sex for 6 months because he cannot stop talking about my boobies, and it makes me sick. Just before the pandemic hit, we were out at a restaurant with some friends. He actually ordered a Chicky Sammy, said that exact phrase, Chicky Sammy. Look, it's totally fine that he ordered the chicken sandwich, that's not the issue. Our friends noticed the baby talk because he insisted on continuing the joke and even started talking with this god-awful toddler Lil accent. After that, I just couldn't stomach the idea of going out with him to adult places. I'd go out to the brewery with friends, But God forbid he'd join me and save me want another beer or something. I don't know where it came from, I don't know why he's doing this. I finally hit my limit when we were grocery shopping and everything seemed normal and fine until he gasped like a kid, ran to the ice cream section and jumped up and down yelling, "Ice cream, ice cream. I want choit." I was mortified. People were staring at him and me. He kept going and kept saying, "Can we get popsicle?" And I just said either talk to me like an adult or I'm leaving. He started saying, "Oh, you must be fun at parties," and "Lighten up will you," and shit like that. I just said it and left the store, leaving him to walk home like a mile. It was fine because I couldn't even look at him. Since then, things have been very tense and he keeps telling me that he wants an apology for embarrassing him by leaving him in the store. I told him that people don't get to demand apologies. If someone wants to apologize, it's up to them, and I am absolutely not going to apologize for saving myself the embarrassment of a 35-year-old man with a mortgage and retirement account asking for chalkwood ice cream. He got his mom involved, no joke. She keeps telling me it's just a phase and that he's probably bored and I should be happy this is his midlife crisis rather than him, 19-year-olds, at the local bar. I'm going crazy. Am I the dude? I really just need to let my husband continuously embarrass me like this? Edit. Sorry, there was only so much space. I have talked to him multiple times, especially about the sexual comments. I've made it extremely abundantly clear that I'm using terms like boobies and wee-wee are absolutely repulsive to me, among other things. He says info. Does he have a job? Yes, and he acts completely normal as far as I know. He worked from home for a while during lockdown and I never heard him talk like this to anyone he worked with. Does he do it with friends? Sometimes, and it's generally meant to annoy them or gross them out, but he stops. He has friends where they think it's cute to embarrass each other. Is this a kink? Fetish? So I'm absolutely done. Has he seen a doctor? No, but I've asked him if he needed to talk to someone because he was acting strange and he accused me of being stuck up and judgmental. Given that he doesn't act like this with his coworkers or his family and only jokes around with his friends, I'm willing to bet that this is an indication that he's trying to force this fetish on me non-consensually or trying to get me to leave. Is it a tumor? I don't know. Like I said above, I asked him if he needed to see someone. I can't force him. Even if I want to just find out if there's any way we can salvage this, but after this post closes I will try to get him too. Maybe his sister can encourage him even though he acts completely normal around them. Does he have childhood trauma? As far as I know, and I'm relatively close to his family and would likely know, the most traumatic thing he had happened was a minor car accident when he was around 13 years old. No injuries, no death, etc. He hasn't been in a car accident in the past 2 years or anything like that, and I haven't, and as far as I know no one else in his family has been, etc. Update. I talked to my husband after doing some soul searching. There was no tumor, no kink, no childhood trauma. I asked him first if he understands why I am upset and to please clarify if he was doing this on purpose or if we needed to seek medical intervention. He didn't want to tell me at first and I got worried. He eventually caved when I suggested we look for a doctor because of how worried I am. It was a bet with one of his friends that started as them trying to embarrass each other in public. He bet my husband that he couldn't keep it up for the whole year. The only off-limits part was at work because he couldn't jeopardize his career. No, he decided to jeopardize his marriage instead. For what prize? What was he going to win? A signed baseball. A baseball. I thought he was still joking. No, he was dead serious. How was the friend verifying? My husband would share little videos he took here and there of him upsetting me with the baby talk, including times he tried to initiate sex by whispering this baby talk in my ear. I wasn't in any state of undress, and by seeing us in public, like at the brewery. He got cross with me in the grocery store because I interrupted the recording and almost blew the whole operation. He wasn't remorseful or apologetic. He thought we were both in on this little joke and that I'd find it hysterical. I asked him, did he understand we haven't had sex in months? No, it didn't matter. It was all worth it to him. He kept saying, you just don't get it, it's not just a baseball. I told him the joke was over, it was time to stop for good, but that I was willing to move on with him. I could forgive him. No, he wanted to keep going. There are only 2 months left in the bet, so he's so close. He said, we can have sex if you want, we'll just pretend XYZ. And I was just like, why is thinking about your friend even factor into this? What's wrong with you? You never had to do this and ruin our intimate moments, but I just didn't get it. He had to be in character all the time. After a lot of arguing and tears, I left him. I'm heading up to Colorado to be with my family through Christmas, and then I'm going to move in with my sister for a little while to figure out next steps. I hope it was worth it. Now on to the next story. Story 10. My parents threw out my sister's favorite pair of shoes for getting a B on a final. My sister got a B on her calculus final, and our parents had a complete meltdown. She's been having trouble in the class all semester, and they have done nothing but tell her to work harder. They told her there would be consequences as if she did not get an A on the test, and they threw out the 2 pairs of Doc Marten shoes she worked the entire summer for. I am so mad at them. She is already taking 3 AP classes and tutoring 3 other students in another class. She barely has a social life because she has to study 24/7. They expect her to get into an Ivy League school, and any other school would be a failure in their eyes. Her dream school is Penn State, but that's not an Ivy League, so they stopped her from applying. They don't plan on paying for her tuition either because they expect her to receive a full scholarship. They treat her like garbage and act surprised when she acts out in response. She doesn't deserve to be treated like this. She ran out of the house in tears, and I found her sobbing in a park next to our house. I know they are just a pair of shoes, but they meant a lot to my sister. She wore them everywhere. I hate seeing her like this. They treat us so differently, and I hate it. They demand perfection from her but coddle me like a baby. They don't expect perfection from me, and if I make a mistake they brush it off. But if my sister comes home 1 minute past curfew, she gets grounded for 2 weeks. I come home an hour past curfew and they tell me next time will be different, but I never receive the punishment. They love parading around their son's achievements but barely speak a word about my sister's achievements to the rest of our family. My uncle told me good job for getting good grades at Thanksgiving last month, and I told him my sister has the highest GPA in her class and he did not care. If she gets anything less than an A, she does not care about her future, but I can get a C in a class and they tell me it's not a big deal and I tried my best. The only reason I got a C in chemistry is because my awesome sister sat me down and helped me. She has been my rock and my role model my entire life, and when she leaves for college next year I'm going to miss her so much. I tell her I'm not going to miss her, but I will. She hasn't left her room all day, and my mom asked me why she's so mad. You cut the laces of her favorite shoes and threw them out the window into the bushes. My sister is not going to talk to them for weeks, probably, and they don't understand why. They are never going to understand why. My sister does not deserve this treatment. My dad does seem extremely remorseful, though. He never says sorry for anything, but he's been knocking on her door since 10 a.m. to apologize and keeps saying he needs to start being more kind to my sister. Update 1. She is staying with my grandparents for the rest of December. They had been talking all day yesterday and my dad agreed to let her stay there for the rest of the month. They are going on a trip the first week of January, so I don't know what will happen then, but the time away from my parents will be good for her. I took her shoes out of the bushes and replaced the laces in case she still wants them in the future. Update 2. My grandparents agreed to let my sister stay with them for the rest of the semester. My sister is going to go to community college for 1 year, her decision, and transfer to Penn State. She has barely spoken to my parents since December, as have I in solidarity with her, and it has had a noticeable effect on them. I gave her back the shoes and she has not worn them yet, but they are still in her room. Now on to the next story. Story 11. I think my 26-year-old ex 26M sabotaged my relationship with my new ex 27M. January 1st, 2022. To make a long story short, my 26F breakup last summer with ex-1 26M was volcanic. He's now expecting a baby with my stepsister within the next 6 weeks or so. Since I found out about the pregnancy, he's tried to get in touch with me 6 times through email/text burner accounts, has tried to get mutual friends to talk to me for him, and showed up to my place once. The latter was the only time I humored him. He told me he was sorry, he loves me, he doesn't want to be with my stepsister, and wants to get back together with me. I told him tough titties. He made his bed and now he's got to lay in it with her. I haven't dated much since July because of my life's implosion, but in November, a friend from college messaged me out of the blue. We hadn't talked in a long time. He, 27M, referred to as X2 for the rest of the post, and X1 were good friends but had a falling out over something fantasy football related the year after we graduated, and I stopped talking to him out of solidarity or whatever. Anyhow, we go on a date, we click, we go on a few more dates, we become exclusive in early December. I was feeling really hopeful about this until this morning. I was supposed to meet X2 at a New Year's party last night. He got there before I left the house and texted me saying that X1 was at the party and asked whether I still wanted to come. I declined and went to another friend's house and have a pretty good time. I tried calling X2 at midnight, but he didn't pick up. I didn't think much about it. Anyhow, I go to bed late, and when I wake up this morning, I have a message from X2 saying we're done. I couldn't even respond because he blocked me everywhere. I talked to a friend who was at the party the exes were at last night, and he said the two of them had spent a good chunk of time chatting with each other, but he didn't know what they were talking about. I'm not close with anyone else who was at the party, so I don't really have anyone else to ask. Like, okay, it was a 2-month-old relationship. I'm sad, but I'm not bereft. But the paranoid part of my mind is really concerned that X1 said something that resulted in X2 becoming X2. X2 has made it abundantly apparent that he doesn't want to talk to me again, and I don't want to push that boundary, but I'm so confused. I could contact X1, but I get the feeling that will open a floodgate of drama. I could also try talking to other mutual friends to see if they've heard anything, but I also don't really want to spread this as a rumor if it wasn't true. I don't know. I'm at a loss. Any advice here? I'm spiraling thinking that my ex is going to try to ruin every relationship I have for the rest of my life. I'm beginning to think that there's something wrong with me. January 16th, 2022, my last 2 partners have cheated on me. The first was a very serious relationship. We lived together, we talked about marriage and buying a house. He even took 2 pictures of us as kids and photoshopped them together to show what our kids might look like one day. The result was terrifying but hilarious, and I had it as the background of my phone for a month. I walked in on him sleeping with my stepsister. Now she's pregnant, due in the near future, and he's with her. I know he's not happy. I know he regrets what he did. I know that he loved me, and none of that stopped him from effing my stepsister in our bed. I've spent so long now being upset at her and writing him off as just a bad decision that I wasted time on. But now I find myself missing what we had. My stepsister and I grew up together and have loved each other most of our lives, so it felt like that was the betrayal. But he and I chose each other out of all the people on the earth. We looked each other in the eyes, committed to each other, and made the promise to stay faithful. And he lied and he lied and he lied and he lied and he let me go on loving him while he lied. And then a few months ago, another guy comes into my life, and for the first time in ages, I felt hopeful. I thought to myself that maybe I could actually move on and live my life. I wasn't in love with him, but he was the kind of man I thought I could fall in love with. We were exclusive for about a month before we made the decision to be exclusive. I told him everything that had happened with my first ex and told him that I could never be with another cheater. I wake up on New Year's Day to a text saying we're done. When I tried getting in touch, I found out he'd blocked me everywhere. Turns out, he met someone at a New Year's party and hooked up with her. Instead of telling me, he just blocked me everywhere and sent a lackey to message me a few weeks later with a real story and a half-ass apology. I want to be angry, and maybe a part of me is, but as I'm sitting here, I'm just thinking, what if it's me? What if I'm just not lovable? What if it's never going to happen for me? The thing is, I've been a pretty confident person. I went through hard shit as a kid, but I got through it and grew stronger. I'm pretty good looking, though I've admittedly put on a little weight in the past couple weeks. I've been told that I'm fun. I hold down a good job and make decent money. I also live my life according to my values. I've always put my family and partner first because that's just how I believed it should be done, and I thought that I would be prioritized in turn. I've lost most of my family because they'd rather have my ST sister's baby in their life than me. My friends have been fair weather for the most part, and I know that I'm a laughingstock in my friend group as much as they pretend to pity me to my face. I feel the little spark I've always had fading. I don't chime in on conversations anymore. I've stopped putting on cute clothes when I go out. I don't plan anything, so I don't have anything to be disappointed about. Soon I'll be the same age as my mom was when she died. I never knew her, but I've always loved her, thinking of her watching over me. I don't remember the funeral, but it was one of those funerals where there wasn't a dry eye in the house. She lit up a room. People tell me she was a good woman. In my worst moments, I wonder what it would be like if I died right now. Would anyone cry? Would anyone care? Would anyone even come? Anyhow, sorry for writing a novella, just not sure what to do anymore and who to talk to if you read all this. Thank you. Update is May 30th, 2022. Hello folks, I thought that things on the internet died after a couple days, so color me surprised when I still get requests for updates on the regular. Long story short, I don't have much to update. I didn't end up going to New Mexico because I conveniently got CO the week before I was supposed to go. The baby was had, but I have had no contact with the baby or their parents. I've done a pretty good job of insulating myself from news about them / the rest of my family. My life is pretty much the same as it was, so sorry to the folks who are hoping I have some kind of happy ending to slap on to all of this. Things are improving just because time barrels on, and you can grow numb to most anything given enough time and distance, but I have had no grand revelations, have not met the love of my life, nor had elaborate revenge on those who have wronged me. I'm going to Europe for the first time in October though, so that's exciting. I will say this. While I appreciate the solidarity and sometimes colorful language used to describe my sister and Ben in my DMs, I wholeheartedly ask everyone reading this not to waste their energy on hating them. They're now parents to a newborn, and regardless of the things they've done in the past, I hope that they can come together as a happy family and raise their child in a loving, healthy home. Hating them doesn't do anything for anyone, including ourselves in the long run. Anyhow, that's the non-update update. I promise that if I meet the love of my life at the top of the Eiffel Tower, or more likely stuffing my face with waffles and brew, I will post another update. Until then, you can assume that I am living, trying my best, and am very appreciative of all of the people out there in the world who have read this saga and reached out with support, even if I have not had the energy to respond to everyone. Update in comments. October 16th, 2022. Hi, just wanted to give a more recent, less depressing update. I am currently in my hotel room in Paris, eating a creme brulee in bed, reading a romance novel, and about to go to sleep early. All is well. New update starts here. Howdy, it's been a while. 9th of September 2023. Hello. So it's been a minute, but I still get messages from folks asking how I've been, and I'm up too early and a little bored. So I thought I'd give you the answer. I'm good. Made a lot of really positive changes in my life, and I am in a much better place physically and mentally than I was last year. To answer some specific questions, no, I'm not in contact with my family. The last straw was in spring 2022. My dad emailed me to ask if we could get lunch and talk. Me, having always harbored the secret and foolish hope that we'd reconcile and go back to normal, agreed. I arrived at the restaurant and waited 2 hours. When my server gave me a free dessert on the house with a pitying look, I called it and went home. Later, I got an email from my stepmom, which I'm sure was full of excuses, but I didn't read it. But the really positive outcome of that was that made me realize that I needed to move far away and not come back, which I did. I'd always been really scared to move away from my family, but since I don't have one anymore, I ended up somewhat spontaneously moving halfway across the country. The spontaneous move was stressful and expensive, but I can now say that moving was one of the best decisions of my life. I ended up reconnecting with an old friend and falling in with her friend group, who are the loveliest people. I've never felt safer or more supported, and I feel so lucky to have them in my life. And it's less humid here. That's a big win. One of our friends is a counselor who helped me find a therapist that I really click with, and it took a few tries and a therapist who didn't immediately want to do CBT with me, which just isn't my thing, but I found someone I really connect with. I'm now doing IFS therapy, and it has really changed my relationship with myself and helped me realize all of the hurt and pain I've been holding on to and start to heal. So y'all were right, and I needed to go to therapy. Give yourselves a pat on the back for that one. I also got diagnosed with depression, and I'm taking medicine for that. It was a bit hard to stomach as someone who always saw her value as being the happy person who takes care of everyone all the time, but it turns out that sometimes when your needs aren't met as a kid, you end up becoming the happy person who takes care of everyone all the time because you're afraid that if you show the slightest bit of unhappiness you won't be loved anymore, and that's effed up. I also met a guy, and I know you're all saying, papaya. No, your decision-making around men cannot be trusted, but I assure you that he's different. Instead of rolling his eyes when I'm feeling off, he'll either just quietly lay on the couch with me or go for a walk, Or he'll say really dirty things to me in his spot on Kermit the Frog voice until I'm laughing so hard I can't focus on anything else, and bonus, he's far too busy painting D&D minis to find the time to cheat on me, so I'm not even worried about that. I did have to invest in some elaborate Renaissance fair costume, which is not something I had imagined for myself, but I'm having a great time. I'm gonna marry this dude someday. As for Ben and my sister, as far as I know, they're still together. Every so often, she tries to get in touch with some manner of burner account, but I ignore all of it. I'm still bummed that I'm not going to be a part of my siblings' life, and I do honestly still really miss my family, but I know this is right for me. Sorry I don't have any salacious info on them, since I know you're all really here to hear about their karmic downfall or whatever, but on my end, things are good, better than they were before I found out I was being cheated on. My current life is built on real contentment, not fear disguised as shallow happiness. It's not perfect, and I have a lot of problems that I'm working through, but I'm proud of myself, and I think my mom would be too. So that's the update. I think it's going to be my last one, at least on this account. Thanks Reddit for supporting me and making me smile through some of the worst, weirdest points in my life. May you too be blessed with internet strangers who cheer you on and offer to sabotage the lives of the people who do you wrong. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.